At the family barbecue, my wife joked, "Who wants to trade my husband? He comes with low maintenance and no ambition." Her divorced neighbor replied, "I'll take him." My wife's smile disappeared when the neighbor added, "When should I pick him up?" If I'm being honest, that Saturday started off like the kind of day Norman Rockwell used to paint. Sunshine, laughter, the faint smell of charcoal, and suburban optimism hanging in the air. Music was blasting from someone's Bluetooth speaker. Kids were running around the yard like caffeinated squirrels, and my grill was doing what it did best, sizzling with enough burgers to end at least one world conflict. It was the American dream, condensed into a backyard and seasoned with barbecue sauce. I was in my zone, tongs in one hand, beer in the other, feeling like the unofficial mayor of cul-de-sac diplomacy. The grill hissed and popped, that perfect soundtrack that says, "Yeah, life might be a circus, but at least you're the ringmaster today." And then, right when I thought I had it all together, bam, my wife, Sabrina, decided to turn our happy little cookout into a full-blown Netflix limited series. You know that feeling when you sense a storm coming but the sky's still blue? That was me. Sabrina was halfway through her third glass of Chardonnay, lounging like she owned the rights to the conversation, holding court in her sun hat like the queen of gossip herself. Every wife in a 10-house radius was leaning in, laughing too loud at stories that were probably about their husband's incompetence. Meanwhile, the guys stood around pretending to care about the grill temperature or the game on someone's phone. It was a social ecosystem of survival, eye contact optional. I was just flipping a perfect medium-rare patty when I heard her voice slice through the laughter like a lawnmower through wet grass. "Who wants to trade my husband? He's low maintenance and has no ambition." It took a full 2 seconds for my brain to process what she said. My first thought was, she didn't just say that. My second thought was, oh yes, she absolutely did. Then the silence hit. Like, movie-style silence. Even the mosquitoes froze mid-flight. Somewhere, a child's juice box stopped making that slurping sound. The universe collectively held its breath. Every guy at that party suddenly developed a deep, spiritual relationship with his beer. Heads dropped. Eyes locked on amber liquid. I swear I could hear the sound of their internal panic. That whispered prayer of, "Please, Lord, don't let my wife get any ideas." I felt my face go warm, partly from the grill, partly from the slow burn of humiliation. Sabrina was smiling, that wine-fueled, "I'm just joking but not really" grin women get when they think they're being cute. The kind that comes with invisible daggers. And then, because fate enjoys a little chaos with its coleslaw, our divorced neighbor, Trish, raised her glass and said, clear as day, "I'll take him." Now, I know that moment didn't last longer than a heartbeat, but it felt like the world slowed down just to make sure I suffered in high definition. Every neck in that backyard swiveled toward her like synchronized Judgment Day. Sabrina's grin flickered, poof, gone faster than the beer evaporating on my grill. Trish wasn't joking either. You could see it in her eyes. She had that divorced and dangerous confidence. The kind of woman who's already been through the war and now collects ex-husbands' egos as trophies. She leaned back in her chair, took a slow sip of wine, and smirked like she'd just bought stock in drama. Meanwhile, my brain was doing a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Possible Responses That Won't End in Divorce." Option 1, laugh it off. Option 2, pretend I didn't hear it. Option 3, crawl into the grill and let the fire take me. Before I could pick one, the awkward silence mutated into nervous laughter. That brittle kind of sound people make when they're terrified but trying to stay polite. Paul, my next-door neighbor, was coughing into his solo cup like it was a life raft. His wife was glaring at him so hard his eyebrows might never grow back. I straightened up, flipped the last burger, and smiled. If I was going down, I was going down with dignity, or at least with comedic timing. "Thanks for doing my marketing, honey," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Should I start packing now, or do you want to help me load the truck?" Cue the second wave of laughter, the "please don't look at me" kind. A few nervous chuckles, a couple of gasps, and one guy muttering, "Oh, hell no." Sabrina blinked. You could almost see her hangover forming in real time. "Oh my God, I was joking," she said, tone dripping with the kind of defensiveness that only makes it worse. Trish wasn't backing down. She twirled her wine glass like a Bond villain and said, "I meant it. When should I pick him up?" The tension was so thick you could spread it on toast. I caught Paul mouthing damn, like he was at a sports event and someone just hit a home run. Sabrina's face. Oh man, it went from smug to panic in 10 seconds flat. You could almost hear the gears grinding as she tried to figure out how to undo the mess she just made. I just shrugged and said, well, at least someone's showing interest in my potential. Paul whispered under his breath. Man, your life just got syndicated. I laughed. Yeah, but at least someone wants to renew my contract. And that, right there, was the kill shot. Because for the first time in what felt like 8 years of marriage, Sabrina didn't have a comeback. She just sat there, frozen, like a mannequin that forgot its line in a store display drama. Everyone tried to pretend the conversation was over, but the air had shifted. You could feel it. The way people avoided looking directly at me, the forced small talk about potato salad, the collective energy of please let this end before someone cries. The burgers were still perfect, by the way. Juicy, charred just enough to make Gordon Ramsay nod in approval. But nobody cared. I could have served gold-plated steaks at that point, and no one would have tasted them over the awkward tension. Eventually, people started making excuses. Oh, it's getting late. I think the kids need a nap. I forgot my cat's piano recital. The whole neighborhood vanished faster than free Wi-Fi in a hotel. Sabrina busied herself collecting plates that didn't need collecting, muttering something about people being too sensitive. I didn't say much, just stood by my grill, finishing my beer, staring at the smoke curling into the sky. You know that moment when you realize the joke wasn't a joke, it was a confession? That was it for me. Because the thing about Sabrina is, she's not cruel on purpose. She just likes attention more than accuracy. Her idea of funny usually came at someone else's expense, and for years, that someone was me. Every cookout, every dinner party, every damn office event, I was the punchline. The harmless husband. The guy with no ambition, no edge, no fire. And I played along because that's what you do when you love someone who doesn't quite see your value until someone else points it out. That night, standing there with grease-stained hands and the smell of smoke in my hair, I realized I was done auditioning for the role of supportive fool. So yeah, maybe it started with burgers, beer, and a casual act of public betrayal. But that was the moment the script flipped. Because when Trish raised her glass and said, I'll take him, I didn't hear flirtation, I heard freedom knocking. And let me tell you, I was just about ready to open that door. So there I was, standing in the middle of my backyard. My kingdom of charcoal, folding chairs, and broken dreams, and every pair of eyes was pointed right at me like I was the next act in a reality show nobody signed up for. You could practically hear the collective thought buzzing through the crowd. Is he gonna laugh, or is this about to turn into one of those viral neighborhood brawls on Facebook Live? I took my sweet time wiping my hands on the grill towel, partly to buy a few seconds, partly to make a point. When you've just been publicly auctioned off by your own wife, timing is everything. I looked up, forced a calm smile, and said, thanks for doing my marketing, honey. Should I start packing now, or do you want to help me load the truck? You could feel the awkward laughter ripple through the crowd, that thin, nervous sound that says, please God, let someone say something else. It was the kind of laughter that's more about survival than humor. The guys laughed too hard, the women laughed too soft, and everyone looked around like they were trapped in a hostage situation where the ransom was emotional stability. And then, from her lawn chair of chaos, Trish leaned forward with that slow grin people get when they realize they just found the detonator. I meant it, she said, raising her glass like she was toasting the end of my marriage. When should I pick him up? If silence had a temperature, that moment dropped about 20 degrees. Even the grill seemed to dim its enthusiasm. Sabrina's face went from wine-drunk and untouchable to, oh crap, did that just happen, in half a second. Paul, my next-door neighbor and self-proclaimed marriage counselor, he's been divorced twice, so you do the math, muttered under his breath. Man, your life just got syndicated. I turned my head, deadpan. Yeah, but at least someone wants to renew my contract. That got another laugh, the kind that carries just enough truth to sting. Sabrina looked at me like I'd just committed high treason against the holy order of passive husbands. Her eyes narrowed, her lips twitched, and she gave that tight smile women use when they want to look calm, but are plotting your social execution. The crowd didn't know what to do. Half of them were pretending to scroll their phones. The other half were deeply invested in the art of staring at their shoes. Someone coughed. Someone else dropped a chip. It was like God himself pressed the awkward silence button and then went out for a smoke break. Now, here's the thing about Trish. She's not subtle. Never has been. She's been divorced for about 2 years, owns 3 rescue cats and a Jeep, and walks around with the kind of confidence that says, yeah, I've burned bridges, but at least I did it in heels. The woman thrives on uncomfortable moments. So, when she said she'd take me, everyone assumed it was a joke. But the way she said it, that slow, steady tone with a side of try me, yeah, she meant every syllable. Sabrina, meanwhile, was unraveling. You could see it in the twitch of her fingers gripping the stem of her wine glass. Oh, come on, she said, laughing that forced laugh women do when they realize they've lost the room. It was a joke. You guys are taking this way too seriously. Trish shrugged. I don't joke about good taste. Oof. Direct hit. You could feel the air leave Sabrina's body like she'd been hit with a dodgeball of truth. I sipped my beer, savoring it like a man who'd just found emotional vindication in a bottle of Bud Light. I guess this makes me a hot commodity, I said. Guess all that low ambition finally paid off. Paul elbowed me. Man, you better patent that line before someone else steals it. Sabrina looked ready to throw the grill at both of us. You think this is funny? She hissed, but still smiled, because image was everything to her. God forbid the suburban gossip mill think we were anything but the picture of backyard perfection. Oh, I think it's hilarious, I said, keeping my tone calm and casual, the verbal equivalent of leaning on a car while it explodes in the background. You make the joke, I get the offer, everybody wins. That line earned a few nervous chuckles, mostly from the men who were trying to memorize it for future use. But Sabrina didn't laugh. She just stood there, holding that wine glass like it contained the last drop of her dignity. Her jaw clenched, and she gave Trish the kind of glare that could melt vinyl siding. Trish didn't flinch. Don't look at me like that, Sabrina. You were the one who started the trade. Sabrina muttered something that sounded like unbelievable, but it was hard to hear over the sound of me dying inside and trying not to show it. Someone finally tried to change the subject. Bless them. These burgers are really good, they said, with the desperate cheer of a kindergarten teacher trying to redirect a brawl. I smiled. Thanks. Marinated them overnight. Goes great with marital tension. More laughter, this time real, but still laced with discomfort. At this point, people were laughing not because it was funny, but because it was safer than silence. As for me, I wasn't even mad. Not yet, anyway. I'd spent years being the easygoing husband, the guy who rolled with the jokes, the one who let Sabrina's sarcasm slide because that's what chill husbands do. But something shifted in that moment. Watching her face fall, watching everyone realize that maybe, just maybe, she'd gone too far this time. That felt like the tiniest sliver of justice. The backyard was a battlefield disguised as a barbecue. You could practically hear the neighborhood group chat forming in real time. Did you see what happened at the Miller's barbecue? OMG, Trish said she'd take him. Is Sabrina okay? Spoiler, she was not. As people started packing up their kids and half-empty plates, the energy was weird. Every, thanks for having us, was laced with the unspoken, we'll definitely be talking about this later. Even the dog looked nervous. When the last guest finally escaped, I turned off the grill and leaned against the counter, feeling the cool evening air brush against my neck. The yard was quiet again, the kind of quiet that's not peace, but aftermath. Sabrina stood a few feet away, her arms crossed. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what she'd said had finally caught up. You embarrassed me, she said flatly. I almost laughed. You're welcome to the club. I've been a member since our 2nd anniversary. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The calm truth was louder than any argument. Maybe next time, I said. Try not putting your husband on Craigslist. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. For the first time in forever, she was speechless. I took that as my cue to grab a beer, clink it against the counter like a toast, and walk inside. That night, I fell asleep in the guest room. Not out of anger. Out of choice. The sheets were cool, the AC was on full blast, and for the first time in years, I wasn't lying next to someone who thought I was the punchline. And damn, that sleep hit different. When the last burger was eaten and the crowd scattered faster than a tax seminar, the backyard looked like the crime scene of a social experiment gone horribly wrong. Solo cups tipped over like fallen soldiers, paper plates stuck to the grass, and the faint smell of burnt ego hung in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower started up, probably some neighbor trying to drown out the memory of my wife putting me on clearance in front of half the zip code. Sabrina and I stood there in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the wreckage of fun. She was collecting plates with that tight, passive-aggressive precision that says I'm mad, but I still care what people think. I was at the grill, poking the coals even though they were dead, because it gave me something to do other than look at her. Finally, she broke the silence. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I turned slowly, spatula still in hand like a knight holding his sword. Oh, really? You're welcome to the club. I've been a member for 8 years. Her face turned the color of overripe tomatoes. Don't start. Oh, I didn't start, I said, flipping an imaginary burger. You did, remember? Right between who wants to trade my husband. And he's low maintenance and has no ambition. She glared at me like I was the problem. You could have backed me up. I laughed. One of those dry, hollow laughs that feels like it's coming from your soul's basement. Backed you up? I was too busy being traded. Kind of hard to multitask when you're on the auction block. You're being ridiculous. And you're right, ridiculous enough to stop being the punchline at my own barbecue. For a second, she looked like she was about to cry. Then she blinked it away, chin high, voice trembling with what she probably thought was righteous indignation. I was just trying to be funny. Everyone jokes about their spouses. Yeah, I said, leaning back against the counter. Except most people don't treat marriage like open mic night. That one landed. I could see it in her eyes, that flash of guilt she tried to bury under a layer of annoyance. But the thing about words is, once they're out, they don't go back in. They just hang there, echoing, taunting. She threw a handful of plastic forks into the trash bag like she was punishing them. You're so sensitive lately. Sensitive? I raised an eyebrow. I'm not sensitive. I'm just done pretending disrespect is cute. She didn't answer, just kept cleaning, her movements sharp, mechanical. It was the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, more like the prelude to a storm you can smell but can't see yet. I walked past her, grabbed a beer from the cooler, and sat on the patio chair that still had the imprint of my humiliation on it. The sun was dipping low, throwing long shadows across the yard. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think about everything you've ignored for way too long. The truth? That moment at the barbecue wasn't the first time Sabrina had thrown a verbal dart at my back. It was just the first time she'd missed the laughter she expected. Usually, her friends would cackle, I'd laugh along, and we'd pretend it was harmless. But tonight, the crowd didn't laugh with her, they laughed at her. And she felt it. I could see it all over her face. The shock, the embarrassment, the realization that maybe her comedy routine had finally bombed. When she came inside, she didn't say another word. Just slammed the sliding door shut behind her like punctuation. The sound echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls, wrapping around my chest like a dare. I followed her in after a few minutes, still holding my beer, still calm. If I've learned anything about arguments, it's this. Whoever stays calm holds the remote control. She was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, the kind of posture that says, I'm ready to rewrite history. You made me look bad, she said. I leaned against the doorway. Correction, you made you look bad. I just gave it subtitles. She frowned. Do you have to turn everything into a joke? Do you have to turn me into one? That one hit harder than I expected. Her eyes softened for half a second before she masked it with frustration. I don't know what you want from me, Mason. I want you to stop treating me like I'm the comic relief in your highlight reel. I said. You want to play queen of the gossip table? Fine, but don't do it at my expense. She scoffed. You're overreacting, right? Because public humiliation is just fun banter. My bad. She rolled her eyes. You're making it sound worse than it was. I took a sip of beer and smiled. That slow, tired kind of smile that comes after you finally stop lying to yourself. You know? That's what you're good at. Minimizing things. My feelings, my effort, my damn existence. Everything's either an exaggeration or a joke. She froze, caught off guard. I didn't yell. I didn't even sound angry. And maybe that's what scared her more. That calm, matter-of-fact tone that meant I wasn't bluffing anymore. I've spent years trying to be the guy who laughs it off, I said. The one who takes the hit so you can keep being the fun one. But you know what? I'm tired of being the setup for your punchlines. She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find the words. That silence. It was new, and it felt good. I walked past her, set my beer down, and started heading toward the guest room. Where are you going? She asked, voice cracking. To get some sleep, I said without turning around. Don't worry. I'll leave the spotlight on in case you want to keep performing. She gasped. Not dramatic, not loud. Just that little sound people make when they realize the script flipped without them noticing. I shut the door to the guest room, exhaled, and sat on the bed. The sheets were cool, the air conditioner humming like a lullaby for the emotionally exhausted. For the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't frustration or resentment. It was peace. Lying there, I thought about all the little digs, the jokes that always ended with, "I'm kidding, babe." The subtle eye rolls when I talked about my work. The way she'd hijack conversations just to remind people I wasn't as ambitious as her friends' husbands. It all added up. Little cuts that never healed because she kept reopening them with a smile. And maybe that's what made that night different. Because when Trish joked about taking me, I saw something in her tone, not just mischief, but recognition. Like she'd been in my shoes once. The partner who kept quiet while their spouse turned love into a roast session. I laughed quietly to myself, not out of joy but relief. The kind that comes when you finally realize you're not crazy for wanting respect. The irony? For all her talk about me having no ambition, that night I finally found some. Not the career kind, the self-respect kind. I rolled over, stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow and steady, and whispered, "Never again." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I slept. Really slept. Like a man who'd finally stopped auditioning for someone else's approval. And let me tell you, that kind of sleep, that's freedom in its purest form. I woke up to the smell of bacon the way some people wake up to a motivational speech. Hopeful, confused, and suspicious that someone is trying to sell them something. The guest room's AC had me cocooned like a human burrito, but bacon is bacon, and I'm only so strong. I rolled out of bed and shuffled down the hall, wearing last night's t-shirt and the kind of face you get when you dream of peace and awaken to the possibility of a trap. The kitchen was staged like a commercial where people pretend breakfast is a love language. Sabrina had gone full production design. Pancakes stacked like architecture, eggs fluffed within an inch of their lives, strawberries fanned out on a plate like they were auditioning for The Bachelor, and a little vase with 2 daisies that had definitely not lived here yesterday. And there, center stage, my wife, hair curled, lipstick flawless, brows razor sharp, smiling like a redemption arc had crawled out of YouTube and asked for a ring. "Good morning, honey," she sang, hitting that bright, airy tone people use when they've done something bad and decorated over it. I poured coffee slowly, letting the smell of roasted beans play defense for my sanity. "Smells like guilt," I said, because if words are free you might as well buy your freedom with them. She tilted her head like a catalog model. "It smells like bacon sweetened with an apology." I took a sip and nodded at the pancake tower. "Neat. Did Publix deliver the remorse pre-sliced?" She didn't flinch, which meant she'd been practicing that face in the bathroom mirror. "I wanted to do something nice." Last night you wanted to do stand-up?" I said, sliding into a chair. She placed a plate in front of me like it was a bribe with syrup. "Eat first, argue later," she tried. The fork was halfway to my mouth when the doorbell rang. Ding-dong, 2 syllables that said, "Of course this is happening." Sabrina's smile twitched. "Who is that at?" I was already walking. The front door swung open to reveal our divorced neighbor, Trish, in cropped jeans and a t-shirt that said "Coffee is my alibi," holding a big ceramic mug and an expression that dared the morning to try her. "Morning," she said, breezy as a lake house. I ran out of sugar. Of course she did. Sunday mornings in suburbia run on lies and sugar. I stepped aside, and Trish slid in with the efficiency of a person who's been here before, which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. Sabrina appeared in the doorway to the kitchen wearing the kind of smile you see on stepmothers in fairy tales right before they sell you to a witch. "What a surprise," she said, tone so sweet you could hear the cavities forming. Trish lifted her mug, the rim lipsticked in a red that didn't apologize for itself. "Don't worry, I just need a little sweetness to start my day." "Good luck finding any here," I muttered, because I am only human and this is America. The tension thickened instantly. Not a normal thick, like cheesecake thick. so dense the syrup on the pancakes actually hesitated when I poured it, as if it were thinking, nope, not going down with this ship. Trish leaned against the counter and surveyed Sabrina's breakfast spread with a low whistle. Wow, you two expecting the mayor? Or is this a peace treaty disguised as carbs? I coughed into my mug to hide the smile. Sabrina glided to the stove like she was being judged on posture. I'm being a good wife, she said lightly, the words performing push-ups for Instagram. Isn't that what everyone wanted? Everyone? Trish asked, eyebrows doing gymnastics. Or just the audience you lost last night? Sabrina's jaw tightened at a speed I felt in my soul. Sugar's in the pantry, I said quickly, and Trish gave me a little nod. An acknowledgement. Not thanks. We weren't doing thanks yet. She stepped into the pantry while Sabrina spooned eggs onto my plate like I'd asked for them, which I hadn't, because the only thing I asked for recently was respect, and that was apparently on backorder. So, Sabrina said, placing a towel on the oven handle with surgical care, how'd you sleep? Like a man who wasn't the punchline, I said. She inhaled through her nose, the way people do when they're counting the exits. I'm trying here. You're staging, I corrected. Trying is honest. Staging is when you put fake books on a shelf because you think buyers are literate. Trish emerged with a canister of sugar and a look that said she'd wandered into a live taping. Found it. Thanks, she said, popping the lid and scooping 2 spoonfuls into her mug. Then she slid onto a stool at the island like it had her name on it. Don't mind me. The words any person says before absolutely minding everything. Sabrina's smile could have cracked porcelain. Actually, we were in the middle of breakfast, and I interrupted, am in the middle of coffee, which requires sugar, which she borrowed, which means she's part of the supply chain. Let the woman sit. Trish raised her mug in a little toast. To logistics. Sabrina's smile recalculated, and she went for polite conversational homicide. So, Trish, big plans today? Cat yoga? Jeep parade? More volunteering. Trish grinned. Nope. Just laundry and watching my neighbor recover from being auctioned in his own backyard. I almost choked on my coffee. Sabrina's eyes flashed. It was a joke. Trish took a slow sip, studied her mug like it had wisdom in it, and then used my own line from last night without mercy. Was it funny? The kitchen blinked. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hummed like a nervous witness. Sabrina looked at me like I'd invited a prosecutor into our breakfast. I apologized, she said to the air. With food. Trish set the mug down gently, the way you put a glass near a grenade. I don't know, Sabrina. Feels like you're trying to buy back the scene, not change the script. And you, Sabrina snapped, are trying to steal him. Steal what? Trish asked, eyes calm but sharp. A man you priced at low ambition next to the coleslaw? I whistled this time. Couldn't help it. The line was clean. Sabrina ignored me. You don't get to talk about our marriage. You made it public, Trish replied, not unkind, just accurate. Front row seats, free tickets, cash bar. I pushed my plate away and folded my hands because breakfast had turned into court and apparently I was the exhibit. Look, I said, keeping my voice even. Everybody's got their truth. Mine is simple. I want respect with my eggs. Trish gave me an approving half smile. Sabrina's mouth flattened, the steam rising off her composure. I respect you, she said, and the way she said it made the daisies in the vase look away. Okay, I said. Prove it in sentences that aren't jokes. I made breakfast, she repeated, louder, like volume is evidence. Trish tilted her head. You know, he pays the bills, keeps the lawn tight, cooks a better burger than a food truck, and somehow you manage to make all that sound like no ambition. That's a wild magic trick. Sabrina's nostrils flared. Stay out of our business. Trish's smile dropped a fraction. You put him on sale, Sabrina. The neighborhood didn't ask for the flyer. I stood, picked up my plate, and set it in the sink. The morning sun threw a warm stripe across the countertop, dust motes floating like confetti that forgot how to celebrate. I felt weirdly calm, like a lifeguard who's already blown the whistle and now just needs everyone to walk to the shallow end. Here's where I'm at, I said, turning to Sabrina. You can't roast me in front of your fan club and then think pancakes are an apology. You want to fix it? Start with words. Start with not calling me low maintenance, like I'm an air plant you barely water. I called you low maintenance because you are easy, she said, wincing the second the words left her mouth. Easy to love, I offered, trying to hand her a lifeline. Easy to be around. Easy as in dependable. She looked at the floor. Fine. Yes. That. Trish swirled her coffee. Honest question, Sabrina, are you between jobs or retired from self-awareness? Sabrina's head snapped up. I'm between opportunities. For 18 months. I added, because the number lived rent-free in my frontal lobe. Trish's eyebrows hopped like they'd been given caffeine. So he's been footing the bills, keeping the grill hot, and getting roasted for being reliable. That tracks. Sabrina pointed her spoon at us like a wand that only cast bad spells. He's not perfect. Correct, I said. I leave socks in dumb places, and I buy gadgets we don't need. But I also show up. I don't belittle you to get laughs. The anger in her eyes softened into something else. Fear, maybe, or the exhaustion of realizing your favorite trick stopped working. She set the spoon down carefully. I was wrong last night, she said, voice quieter. And I don't know why I kept doing that, turning everything into a bit. I nodded, because progress doesn't need applause, just daylight. Because it made you feel powerful, Trish said, straightforward as a seatbelt click. Sabrina blinked, and for a second I thought she might actually cry. It would have been human, and maybe helpful, but she swallowed it back. Old habits like their corner office. I thought it was harmless, she said. It wasn't. The words came out steady, not cruel. I turned to the sink, ran water over my plate, watched the syrup ribbon down the drain like a metaphor that paid taxes. Behind me, the women were silent, the kind of silence that happens right after surgery when everyone waits to see if the patient breathes on their own. The doorbell dinged again, because when you think you've reached your daily quota of chaos, life throws in a bonus. This time it was Paul, holding a Tupperware of potato salad like a diplomatic offering. Hey, I think this was Carla's, he said, then clocked the room. Oh, y'all doing morning therapy? Grab a stool, Trish said, and I snorted. Nope, Paul blurted, backing away like the floor was lava. I'm allergic to tension before noon. He set the Tupperware down and fled, proving once again that men will run from feelings faster than they run a 5K. I dried my hands and looked at Sabrina. So here's the deal. Respect or silence. Those are the only two ways my name gets used in public from now on. Pick one. She nodded, small, like a kid returning stolen gum. Okay. It wasn't grand, but it wasn't nothing. I can work with okay. Trish slid off the stool and tapped the sugar lid shut. Well, I got what I came for, she said. Sabrina's eyes flared again. Sugar. Clarity. Trish answered, then winked at me with so little heat it registered more as solidarity than flirting. But also sugar. She headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Sabrina, this would have been a lot easier last night if you'd said the two magic words. I'm sorry, Sabrina offered. Thank you, Trish said, jerking a thumb at me. Because the man grilled like a saint while you were workshopping insults. She left on that, breezy and brutal, and the quiet she took with her felt cleaner, like someone finally opened a window. I stood there, hands on the cool countertop, the kitchen smelling like bacon, coffee, and second chances sold at market price. Sabrina turned to the sink, rinsed a plate, and said without looking up, I'm sorry. Real this time. No garnish. I nodded once. Thank you. She swallowed. Do you want more pancakes? No, I said, sliding my mug toward the edge. I want to try again with sentences that don't put me on sale. She nodded, wiped the counter in small circles, and didn't argue. Outside, a bird started up with some perky little melody that would have annoyed me yesterday, but today sounded like a reset. I took my coffee to the back step and sat down, the wood warm under my palms, morning light spilling across the yard like it had never seen a scandal. Behind me, I heard dishes clink and water run and no performance at all, just a normal morning trying to grow out of a loud night. After a minute, Sabrina joined me, sitting far enough to be polite, but close enough to be intentional. We didn't talk. Didn't need to. The silence wasn't a contest anymore. It was a space. And for the first time in forever, I felt like breakfast might actually be the start of a day instead of the aftermath of one. If there's one thing I've learned about suburban diplomacy, it's this. When someone says, "Can we talk?" before breakfast, what they really mean is prepare to defend yourself. So naturally, when Trish sat down at our kitchen table with a mug of my coffee like she owned stock in the place and said, "So, about that husband trade offer," I knew the universe wasn't done mocking me yet. The air went still. Sabrina froze mid-sip, her coffee cup hovering halfway to her lips like she'd been caught in a still frame of a reality TV meltdown. Her jaw tightened, her smile turned to granite, and she gave Trish the kind of look that said, "How dare you bring up the truth in my house?" "It was a joke," Sabrina said finally, the word joke trembling like it was scared to be here. Trish didn't even blink. She tilted her head, smiled just enough to be dangerous, and asked, "Was it funny?" And just like that, my morning turned into an episode of The Real Housewives of Suburbia. I almost choked on my eggs. Sabrina's eyes snapped to me, like I was supposed to be the referee in this emotional steel cage match. Nope, not today. I was just the guy with the spatula and a ringside seat. Trish leaned back in her chair, cool and collected, swirling her coffee like a villain monologuing in Act 2. "You know, I've been thinking about that trade offer," she said. "He seems pretty happy for a low-ambition guy. He makes good coffee, too. That counts as ambition in my book." I grinned into my plate, pretending to focus on my bacon. "I try." Sabrina set her mug down a little too hard, the sound sharp enough to make even the syrup pause mid-pour. "You don't have to entertain her," she snapped. Trish shrugged. "Oh, I'm just giving compliments where they're due. Can't help it if some people don't appreciate what they've got." "Some people?" Sabrina repeated, her tone climbing an octave like it was training for opera. "You mean me?" Trish smiled sweetly. "If the wine glass fits." Now, for the record, I'm not proud of this, but I sat there eating pancakes like I was watching live theater. I didn't start it. I didn't want it. But God help me, I wasn't about to stop it either. Sabrina crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're trying to pull, but you can stop acting like you care." Trish's smile sharpened. "Oh, I care. I care about people being treated right. Especially good guys who spend years paying mortgages, fixing leaky faucets, and grilling steaks for women who treat them like background noise." You could feel the temperature in the room spike. I swear the butter on the table started sweating. Then Trish dropped the real grenade. "By the way, Sabrina, you still between jobs?" Sabrina stiffened. "I'm between opportunities." Trish arched a brow. "For 18 months. I swallowed a mouthful of coffee and decided to commit social suicide. She's been between opportunities so long. I think the opportunities filed for a restraining order." Trish burst out laughing. Sabrina didn't. She turned that laser glare on me, the one that's melted stronger men. "Not helping," she hissed. "Hey, I'm just following the plot," I said, leaning back. "Apparently, I'm the unambitious husband, so I'm just keeping my role consistent." Trish smirked. "You're the one paying the bills, right?" "Yep." "And cooking breakfast?" "Yep." "Keeping the lawn clean, fixing the gutters, paying property taxes, and making sure this house doesn't look like an episode of Hoarders?" "Pretty much." Trish turned to Sabrina. "Then maybe low ambition isn't the insult you think it is. Maybe it's code for dependable, stable, grown." Sabrina's lips parted like she was about to unleash a comeback, but none arrived. She looked around the kitchen like she could find dignity behind the toaster. "You don't know what you're talking about." Trish shrugged. "Maybe not. But I know what I saw last night. A man being humiliated by someone who's supposed to be his partner." "That's enough," Sabrina snapped, standing now. "Stay out of our business." Trish smiled, unbothered. "You made it everyone's business when you put him on sale." I nearly spit out my coffee. That one landed so clean it deserved a slow clap. Sabrina's eyes watered, but not from sadness, from fury. "You're jealous," she said. "You can't stand seeing someone happy, so you try to ruin it." Trish tilted her head. "If you were happy, I wouldn't be ruining anything." I felt that one in my bones. Sabrina turned to me, desperate now. "Are you just going to sit there and let her disrespect me in my own house?" I set my mug down slowly. "You mean like how you disrespected me in our backyard?" Her lips trembled. "That was a joke." "No, that was a broadcast," I said. A live feed of my dignity getting grilled next to the burgers. The kitchen went silent again. Even the refrigerator compressor took a break to see how this played out. Trish stood, brushing crumbs from her jeans. "Well, this has been productive," she said with a tone so chipper it made Sabrina twitch. "Next time you host brunch, maybe skip the roast." She grabbed her mug and headed for the door. Before leaving, she paused, looked at me, and said, "Coffee was great, by the way. You ever open a cafe? I'll invest." Sabrina's jaw dropped. "You?" "Relax," Trish said, smiling. "I'm just teasing. See, It's only funny when both people laugh. Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of espresso and vengeance. Sabrina slumped into her chair, her voice quieter now. She's trying to steal you. I sighed. Steal what exactly? A man you just listed as clearance stock? She's jealous, Sabrina said, her voice rising again, desperate for control. Jealous of what? Your unemployment benefits. That did it. That one hit the target dead center. She froze, eyes wide, lips trembling. You're unbelievable. I'm consistent, I said. You make the jokes. I just learned to tell better ones. She turned away, whispering to herself. You've changed. I shook my head. No. I stopped pretending your version of love was normal. That one hung in the air, heavy and ugly and true. Sabrina didn't respond. She just sat there, staring into her untouched coffee like it might have answers. For a moment, I almost felt bad, not because I'd said too much, but because she finally heard it. I stood up, grabbed my jacket from the chair, and headed toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, voice small. For a walk, I said, before someone else mistakes me for a bargain. Outside, the morning air hit like a reset button. The sun was bright, the street quiet, and somewhere down the block, a kid was laughing, the kind of laugh that didn't know about pride or ego or who said what at dinner parties. I took a deep breath and let it out slow. Because here's the truth they don't put in marriage books. It's not the big betrayals that end things. It's the tiny ones, the jokes that cut too deep, the silence after the punchline, the mornings where the apology smells like bacon but tastes like manipulation. By the time I came back, the dishes were washed, the table cleared, and Sabrina was gone upstairs. On the counter, she'd left a note. Just one line, in that looping handwriting she used when she wanted to sound innocent. I didn't mean to hurt you. I picked it up, read it twice, then folded it in half and tucked it into my back pocket. Not because it meant forgiveness, but because it meant acknowledgement. And that was more than I'd gotten in a long time. I looked around the kitchen, at the empty plates, the half-empty syrup bottle, the mug Trish forgot. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the background character in my own house. I poured one last cup of coffee, black this time, and muttered to myself, well, if this is the fallout, at least it came with breakfast. There's a moment right after someone storms out of your kitchen when the silence feels heavier than the door they slammed. It lingers. You can almost hear it breathing, smug and satisfied, like it just won something. That's the kind of silence I came home to that afternoon. Thick, self-righteous, and wrapped around the scent of burnt toast and wounded pride. Sabrina was on the couch, mascara slightly smudged, wine glass already refilled. That's how I knew this wasn't going to be a calm discussion. If there's wine before noon, there's drama before 2. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and braced for impact. She's trying to steal you, she shouted before I even made it into the living room. I blinked. Steal me? What am I, a flat-screen TV? I'm serious, she snapped. Trish wants you. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Trish wants peace and quiet. She also wants sugar. I think we can safely say I'm not on her grocery list. You think this is funny? She asked, slamming her glass down on the coffee table hard enough to make the coasters flinch. Oh, it's hilarious, I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. Because nothing screams healthy marriage like accusing your neighbor of grand theft husband. You don't get it, she said, pacing now. She's jealous. She wants what we have. What we have. I repeated. You mean public humiliation and emotional constipation? She gasped, offended. You're unbelievable. Thank you, I said dryly. I work hard to be consistent. Sabrina glared. You're defending her. No, I'm defending logic. There's a difference. You can't insult me in front of the entire neighborhood and then play the victim when someone else doesn't worship at your brunch table. You're twisting everything. I leaned against the counter, calm as a monk at a drum circle. No, Sabrina. I'm just finally calling it what it is. She froze mid-step. And what is it then? It's a pattern, I said. You make me the joke, and I play along so you can feel like the fun one. You take shots, I laugh, you get applause, and I get to be the lovable idiot who never minds being disrespected. It's been your favorite routine since year 2. She didn't move. Her face went blank, the kind of blank that isn't confusion but defense. I'd seen it before. It's what she does when she realizes she's losing an argument she didn't prepare for. Her voice softened. You're being dramatic. Yeah, I said. Because subtlety didn't work. She crossed her arms, eyes darting toward the TV like she wanted an escape route. You know what? Fine. You're perfect. Saint Mason, the long-suffering husband. I laughed. Oh, please. I'm not perfect. But I'm also not the one who turned marriage into a roast battle. Her lip trembled. For a second, I thought maybe, finally, we were going to have a real conversation. But then she grabbed her wine glass again, refilled it like the answer was somewhere at the bottom, and said, I can't talk to you when you're like this. When I'm like what? I asked. Calm, honest, unamused. She flung her hand dramatically. When you make me feel like the villain. Maybe stop doing villain things, I said. Problem solved. Her voice cracked. You're cruel. No, I said, taking a sip of water. I'm just done letting you treat me like a prop in your comedy routine. She laughed bitterly. Oh my God, listen to yourself. You sound so self-righteous. I shrugged. That's what self-awareness sounds like. She sat down hard on the couch, pressing her palms to her forehead like she was trying to hold the headache in. You used to be easy. You used to just let things go. Yeah, I said, because I didn't realize letting things go meant letting me go. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional ice clink from her wine glass. The symphony of a marriage passed its melody. Then, like clockwork, she went for the nuclear option. You've changed. I laughed under my breath. That's the point. No, you used to be. She stopped, searching for words, for the version of me that used to absorb her barbs with a smile. You used to be patient. I used to be silent, I corrected. There's a difference. She blinked, thrown off by how calm I was. That's the thing about calm. It scares people more than yelling ever could. She wanted fireworks. I gave her ice. You think you're so much better than me now, don't you? She asked. I thought about it, then nodded. A little, yeah. Her mouth fell open. Unbelievable. Honest, I said. And it's not because you're some terrible monster. It's because you don't listen until someone else says the quiet part out loud. Like Trish. She didn't tell me anything new. She just held up a mirror. Sabrina's eyes welled up. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. Which one? The joke, the denial, or this argument where you pretend you're the victim? That got me silence. Long, painful, truth-filled silence. Then came the tears. Not dramatic ones. Just slow, real, exhausted tears that told me she finally understood this wasn't a game anymore. She covered her face, shoulders shaking, and I stood there feeling nothing. No joy, no triumph, no sadness. Just relief. Like someone finally turned the noise down after years of static. After a few minutes, she said quietly, I don't know why I do it. I wanted people to like me. I sighed. Sabrina, people already liked you. You didn't need to throw me under the bus to get extra applause. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, smearing mascara like war paint. You hate me now, don't you? I sat down on the opposite end of the couch. No, I just don't like what we became. She sniffled. Can we fix it? I thought about it. The years, the digs, the fake smiles at dinner parties, the apologies that came with side dishes. Maybe, I said. But not if you keep pretending I'm the problem. You need to rebrand. She stared at me, searching my face for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or the man who used to let everything slide. But that man was gone. Retired. Out of business. Finally, she nodded. I'll do better. I didn't say anything. Promises mean less than silence until action shows up. By evening, she was curled on the couch, a blanket around her, watching reality TV reruns, the irony not lost on either of us. I sat in my recliner, flipping channels until I landed on Shark Tank. There's something deeply satisfying about watching people pitch their dreams while others tear them apart. It felt poetic. Sabrina sniffled again. You're really not going to talk to me? I'm listening, I said, not looking up. Talking's what got us here. She let out a shaky laugh, the kind that's half regret, half exhaustion. You're impossible. And you're predictable, I said, still watching TV. But at least we're consistent. By the time the credits rolled, she'd fallen asleep. Wine glass still on the table, TV light flickering across her face. I turned down the volume, covered her with the blanket, and stood there for a long minute. Because here's the thing about love. Sometimes it doesn't die in one big, cinematic explosion. Sometimes it fades like the battery in a remote, one click at a time, until you realize nothing's changing the channel anymore. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. Maybe that's growth. Maybe that's fatigue. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Before bed, I checked my phone. A text from Trish popped up. How's the morning after tour? Need a drink later? I stared at it for a second, then typed back. No drinks. Just peace. She sent a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. Perfect. As I climbed into bed, the guest bed again, my chosen fortress, I heard Sabrina stirring downstairs. The faint sound of a sniffle, a sigh, the muted creak of regret. But I didn't move, didn't rush to comfort, didn't play the part. For once, I let the silence speak for me. And damn, it said everything I needed. There are few things more suspicious than waking up to the sound of paper flipping in a quiet house. That soft, rhythmic turning, like guilt in paperback form. When I opened my eyes that morning, sunlight was sneaking through the blinds. And there she was, Sabrina, sitting at the foot of the bed with a notebook. Not her phone, not a tablet, a notebook. The analog guilt machine itself. She looked like a student who'd stayed up all night cramming for the exam she never studied for. Hair messy, still in her robe, and holding a pen like it was both a weapon and a peace offering. I squinted at her. Please tell me you're not writing a tell-all memoir called Married to a Man Without Ambition. Because I might sue for royalties. She gave me a look, the tight-lipped, don't start look. It's a list, she said softly. I yawned. Of what? Your enemies? Because I already know I'm on page 1. It's a list of things I appreciate about you. That woke me up faster than caffeine. I sat up, staring at her like she'd just said she joined a monastery. Oh, and how many pages is that? Half. She frowned, flipping the notebook toward me so I could see. Her handwriting. Neat, loopy, too perfect, like she rehearsed sincerity. You pay bills, she began. You never cheat. You mow the lawn. I blinked. Wow. So basically, I'm a reliable Roomba with health insurance. Her jaw tightened. You're twisting my words. No, I said, leaning back on my elbows. I'm just reading your list. You appreciate the services, not the person. You listed me like a home maintenance package. She shut the notebook with a sigh. You're impossible to please. Correction, I said. I'm impossible to pacify with mediocrity disguised as gratitude. Her shoulders slumped. You always have to make a speech, don't you? Only when I'm awake, I said. And usually after being compared to a riding mower. She rolled her eyes, but there was something softer in her voice now. I was trying to do something good. You're just so self-aware, articulate, handsome, exhausting. I smiled. There it is. She stood up and started pacing, her Olympic event of choice. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I'm trying, okay? I made a list. I'm apologizing. I'm cooking. I'm doing all the things you say you want. Yeah, I said, swinging my legs off the bed. Except the one thing I actually asked for. She frowned. And what's that? Respect. That word hit the air like a grenade with a long fuse. She froze. Her eyes darted between me and the notebook like maybe she could write her way out of this conversation. Finally, she said quietly, I do respect you. I laughed. Not a big laugh, just that single exhale of disbelief you let out when someone tries to convince you the sky's orange. If this is respect, I'd hate to see what mockery looks like. She crossed her arms. I've said I'm sorry, Mason. Yeah, I said, but I don't need an apology. I need evidence. She blinked. Evidence. I nodded. You ever notice how you always say you're sorry, but never act like it? You drop a line, I drop the argument, and then 2 weeks later, same joke, different crowd. It's like Groundhog Day, but instead of a rodent, it's my self-esteem dying of secondhand embarrassment. She sat back down on the bed, quieter now. So what are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying, pack your things. Her head jerked up. What? I stood, running a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of years pressing down like humidity. You heard me. Pack your things. I can't do this anymore. Her mouth fell open. You're kicking me out. I'm freeing us both, I said. You from pretending you're happy, and me from being your favorite prop. She blinked rapidly, trying to process. You're serious. I nodded. Dead serious. I've spent too long trying to make this work while you've been auditioning for the role of funny wife who just can't help roasting her man. Congratulations, you got the part. But I'm done being your co-star. She stared at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat. But I love you. I turned toward the window, because looking at her felt too heavy. No, I said quietly. You love my free labor. You love the stability I provide, the house, the bills paid, the groceries stocked, the peace you get to ruin at your convenience. But me, I turned back to her. You don't love me. You love the benefits. She stood up, trembling. That's not fair. Neither is being someone's emotional punching bag at every social event. Tears started forming, real ones this time. Please, Mason, don't do this. We can fix it. I shook my head. No, Sabrina. I tried to fix it. You tried to patch it. There's a difference. You can't slap pancakes and posted apologies on top of years of disrespect and call it renovation. Sometimes you gotta tear the whole damn house down. She was crying now, voice cracking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. But you did. And meaning doesn't erase damage. Her legs gave a little, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching that stupid notebook like it was a lifeline. What am I supposed to do? Start over, I said simply. Find out who you are when you're not performing. She looked up, eyes red, and whispered, and you? I'm going to remember what peace feels like, I said. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot. The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It was flat, empty, like the aftermath of a storm that finally spent itself. I went to the closet, pulled out her suitcases, and set them on the bed. She watched me, frozen. I opened drawers, started folding her clothes, neatly, methodically. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. She finally stood, voice trembling. You're serious. Serious enough to start laundry before noon, I said. She let out a breath that sounded like defeat. You'll regret this, she whispered. I smiled softly. Maybe, but at least it'll be my decision to regret. She didn't argue after that. Just sat there, watching me fold the last of her blouses. For once, she didn't have a clever line or a sarcastic jab. And I realized she didn't know how to exist without them. When I zipped the last suitcase, the sound echoed through the room like punctuation. There, I said, stepping back. Your things are ready. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Raw? You're really done, aren't you? Yeah, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. I think I stopped being your husband the moment you put me up for trade. I'm just catching up now. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I nodded toward the suitcases. That's the problem, Sabrina. You never think I'll do anything. You assume I'll stay, smile, swallow it all, and reset tomorrow. But this time, tomorrow's mine. She sat there in silence, eyes following me as I picked up my phone and wallet from the nightstand. I hope you find someone who laughs at your jokes, I said softly. And I hope next time, you remember the punchline's supposed to make people laugh, not hurt. Then I walked out. Halfway down the stairs, I heard her sob. Deep, breaking, human. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't even sad. It was just real. And maybe that's all either of us had left. When I reached the bottom, I looked around the house. At the kitchen we fought in, the table we performed at, the couch that knew more secrets than it should have. And I thought, maybe love doesn't die loud. Maybe it just fades quietly into the background, waiting for someone brave enough to notice. I grabbed my keys, opened the door, and stepped outside into the sunlight. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel traded. I felt free. Folding someone's clothes into a suitcase feels weirdly ceremonial. There's a rhythm to it. Not the tender kind, like packing for a vacation, but the quiet, methodical kind you use when you've decided peace is more important than pretending. That's what I told myself as I zipped the final bag shut, the sound slicing through the air like a verdict. Sabrina was still standing by the dresser, arms crossed, eyes red but defiant. She'd gone through all 5 stages of grief in the last 2 hours, sometimes twice. Denial? Check. Anger? She threw a pillow. Bargaining? Promised to change. Depression? The silent tears. Acceptance? Well, we weren't there yet, but she was getting closer. You can't just kick me out, she said again, her voice trembling between heartbreak and entitlement. I took a breath, steady. Sabrina, I'm not kicking you out. I'm setting you free. There's a difference. Don't give me your therapist voice, she snapped. You're not the calm one here, Mason. You're done. I offered. Yeah, I know. She glared, eyes wet but sharp. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said, picking up one of the suitcases. Just a man who finally figured out that self-respect isn't negotiable. She watched me carry the bag toward the door like it was the last scene of a movie she didn't want to end. Where will I go? She asked finally, her voice cracking. Try Indeed.com, I said without missing a beat. That one landed. She flinched like the words had weight, and maybe they did. Because here's the thing. When you've been the emotional janitor in your own marriage, cleaning up every mess your partner makes, you eventually run out of mops. I opened the front door, sunlight spilling into the living room like an unwanted witness. I set the suitcases down neatly by the mat, dusted my hands, and turned back toward her. There, I said. Stage is yours. Her face twisted, the pain shifting into anger. This is Trish's fault, she hissed. She's been trying to get between us for months. Right on cue, like the universe was tired of subtlety, Trish appeared outside watering her plants. Denim shorts, tank top, hair tied back. She looked like peace-wearing sneakers. She caught sight of us through the open door and waved cheerfully, hose in one hand, cup of coffee in the other. Morning, neighbor, she called. Perfect timing, I muttered. Sabrina's head whipped around. Don't you dare. But Trish was already leaning against the fence, smiling like she'd been waiting for this scene her whole life. Need a hand with those bags? She asked sweetly. Sabrina pointed at her, face red. You? This is all your fault. Trish raised an eyebrow. Technically, you offered the trade. I just raised my hand. Mic drop. Sabrina's jaw dropped, then slammed shut. You're disgusting, she spat. Trish sipped her coffee calmly. Maybe, but I'm not unemployed and mean before breakfast. I coughed into my fist, mostly to stop myself from laughing. It didn't work. A small, traitorous chuckle escaped. Sabrina turned on me. You think this is funny? A little, I admitted. Not the situation, just the delivery. Her hands flew up. I can't believe this. You're actually siding with her. I'm not siding with anyone, I said. I'm just acknowledging good comedic timing when I hear it. Sabrina grabbed one of the smaller bags, shaking with fury. Fine. If this is what you want, then enjoy your perfect little neighborhood soap opera. Already am, I said, stepping aside so she could pass. She dragged the bag to the car, muttering under her breath. Trish watched from her lawn, arms folded, looking somewhere between satisfied and genuinely sad. Because for all her fire, I think she actually pitied Sabrina. When Sabrina came back for the second suitcase, she shot me a look, one that said you'll regret this. I held her gaze. Spoiler alert, I won't. Her lips quivered, but she didn't respond. She just grabbed the handle and stomped out the door. Trish called over. Hey, at least you're getting some exercise. I closed my eyes. Trish. What? She said, mock innocent. Encouragement is self-care. Sabrina froze on the walkway, spun around, and pointed at her. You'll regret this, too. Trish gave her a small, smug smile. Honey, I already regretted marriage once. I'm good. The air between them crackled, tension thick enough to grill another burger on. Sabrina turned away, yanking open the car trunk like it owed her money. She shoved the bags inside, slammed it shut, and for a brief moment, she looked small. Just a woman who'd built her world on control and finally realized she couldn't hold on to anything anymore. She got into the car, started the engine, and stared straight ahead. You're going to miss me, she said through the open window. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I already do, I said quietly. But not the version you've been lately. She hesitated, eyes flicking toward me for half a second, just long enough for me to see the flash of regret. Then she pulled out of the driveway and sped off, taillights cutting through the calm like punctuation at the end of a long, loud sentence. Silence fell again, this time lighter, almost warm. Trish set her coffee down and walked over, still holding the hose. Well, she said, nodding toward the empty driveway. That escalated quickly. You think? I said, rubbing the back of my neck. She grinned. You handled it better than most men would have. If it were me, I'd have thrown her clothes out the window like confetti. I considered it, I admitted. But I'm too old to start explaining things to cops. Trish laughed, a real one, not the tight, polite kind people use at cookouts. So what now? You gonna celebrate your freedom, or just stand here looking like a Hallmark movie in reverse? I'm leaning toward both, I said. She smirked. I've got beer and leftover pizza if you need emotional support. I chuckled. You offering therapy or temptation? Depends on what time you show up. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. You're relentless. She shrugged. What can I say? Divorce gives you hobbies. For a moment, we just stood there, neighbors, survivors, maybe a little broken but unashamed of it. There was no flirting, no tension, just understanding. The kind you can't fake. After a beat, I asked, "Do you think she'll be okay?" Trish looked down the road, where Sabrina's car had vanished. "Eventually," she said, "but she's gonna have to face herself first. And that's harder than losing a husband." I nodded. "Yeah, been there." Trish handed me her hose. "Here, you look like a man who needs to clean something." I laughed. "What? Like repentance?" "Like the driveway," she said. "It's covered in drama." She walked back toward her house, leaving me standing there, holding a green garden hose like it was a metaphor for starting over. I turned on the water and let it run, the stream hissing against the pavement, washing away little patches of dust and spilled emotions. The longer I stood there, the lighter I felt. Not happy exactly, but empty in a good way, like a cluttered room finally cleaned out. After a while, Trish called over from her porch. "You know, you could have done a lot worse than me." I laughed. "Is that your way of saying you accept the trade?" She winked. "I'm saying I don't reject it." I shook my head. "You're impossible. And you're free," she called back. "Don't waste it." When the water finally stopped, I coiled the hose, leaned against the porch post, and looked out at the quiet street. The same cul-de-sac where I'd grilled burgers, smiled through humiliation, and realized what self-worth actually tasted like. It wasn't steak. It was silence. Sabrina was gone. The house felt bigger, emptier, but not lonely. Just waiting, like a place that could finally breathe again. I looked down at the faint damp streaks on the driveway where her car had been and said to no one in particular, "Guess I'll call that spot closure." Then I walked back inside, locked the door, and exhaled, not in sadness, not in victory, just relief. And damn, it felt good. 3 weeks after Sabrina drove off with her suitcases and leftover resentment, I decided to fire up the grill again. Same backyard, same faded lawn chairs, same slightly dented cooler that had seen more emotional breakdowns than tailgates. But the vibe? Oh, the vibe had changed. This time, there was no tension in the air, no passive-aggressive playlist of women with something to prove blasting from the Bluetooth speaker. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and I swear even the mosquitoes seemed less judgmental. It felt like hitting reset on life. I'd cleaned up the yard earlier that morning, trimmed the grass, wiped down the patio table, even threw out that burnt spatula Sabrina swore was seasoned. I wanted everything fresh. New era, new energy, same man, just slightly better marinated. Around noon, Trish came over. Of course she did. If there's one thing you can count on in the suburbs, it's that divorced neighbors can smell a grill lighting up faster than raccoons smell trash. She strolled in through the gate like she owned stock in the place, holding a tray of sliced tomatoes and laughing to herself. "You really did it," she said. "You brought back the neighborhood barbecue. You're braver than I thought." I smirked. "Well, the trauma fades faster when you replace it with brisket." "Fair point," she said, setting down the tray. "Half the wives think I'm evil, by the way. And the other half," I asked, "think I'm their spirit animal." We both laughed. The grill hissed, smoke curling up like a peace offering to the gods of redemption. There's something therapeutic about grilling after emotional chaos. The sizzle feels like closure. The smell of charred meat somehow reminds you that life moves on, that mistakes, like marinades, eventually soak in, lose their bitterness, and turn into flavor. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. She flipped the burger buns. I laid out fresh patties, each one perfectly round, none of them symbolizing disappointment. "So," she said, leaning on the counter, "how's the single life treating you, Mr. Bachelor of the Barbecue?" I chuckled. "Well, I don't have to explain why we're out of oat milk anymore, so that's a plus." "Sleeping better?" "Like a man who isn't being judged by the way he folds towels." She grinned. "You fold towels?" I shrugged. "Now I do. I'm wild like that." She laughed, and for a second, I realized how different that sound was from Sabrina's laughter. Trish laughed with people, not at them. It was free, unforced, and didn't carry that sharp edge that always made me brace for impact. A few neighbors started trickling in. Apparently, word spreads fast when the local scandal turns into an event. Paul and his wife, Carla, came first, pretending they just happened to be passing by. Then the Millers from 2 houses down showed up with chips and what they claimed was homemade guacamole, it wasn't. I saw the plastic lid. Even old Mrs. Langford brought her dog, who had better social skills than half the HOA. And just like that, the yard was alive again. Chatter, laughter, the clink of bottles, and the soft buzz of suburban gossip dying a natural death. As I was flipping burgers, Paul sidled up next to me, beer in hand. "Man, this feels weirdly peaceful," he said. "Like, I keep waiting for Sabrina to pop out of the bushes and start roasting someone." "She's not invited to this season," I said deadpan. "We rebooted the franchise. Fewer tears, more seasoning." He laughed, raising his bottle. "Amen to that." For once, people were relaxed, genuinely relaxed. No forced smiles, no side-eyeing the host's marriage, no whispered, "Did you hear about?" Energy floating around. Just people eating, drinking, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, we were all allowed to start over. Then, right as I was putting the finishing touches on the ribs, I heard it. That voice I'd once heard every morning, somewhere between a yawn and a complaint. "Mason." The entire yard went silent. It was like someone had pressed pause on the party. Even the dog stopped panting. Sabrina stood at the edge of the lawn, wearing jeans and a Target name tag that said assistant floor manager. Her hair was tied back, makeup minimal, but the confidence that used to drip off her like perfume was gone. She looked real and nervous. Trish's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't move. She stayed next to the cooler, quiet. Everyone else pretended to look at the food like they weren't waiting for the sequel. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped forward, keeping my tone even. "Hey." She swallowed. "Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed not now. But the kind of man who says yes to closure doesn't win awards. He just sleeps better. "Sure," I said. She walked closer, eyes flicking toward Trish, then the grill, then me. "I got a job," she blurted out. "At Target. Full-time." I nodded. "Good for you." "I'm trying," she said quickly. "Really trying. I'm sorry for everything. For the jokes, the way I treated you, all of it. She exhaled shakily. "I didn't realize how much I needed you until you stopped letting me need you." There was a part of me that wanted to say something comforting, something movie-worthy. But reality doesn't come with a soundtrack, and forgiveness doesn't always come with confetti. "I'm glad you're doing better," I said. "I really am." She looked around the yard, seeing the easy laughter, the calm faces, the peace she never knew how to sit in. Her lip trembled. "You replaced me fast." I almost laughed. "Sabrina, I replaced chaos with calm. You just happened to be holding the chaos." She winced, but didn't argue. "I made a lot of mistakes." "Yeah," I said softly. "So did I. Staying too long was one of them." She nodded, tears welling up, but not falling. "I hope you're happy." "I am," I said. "Not perfect, not healed, but happy enough to grill without worrying about emotional landmines." She smiled faintly, the kind that says I get it now, but it's too late. "Well," she said, stepping back, "I just wanted to say that. I won't bother you again." "Take care, Sabrina," I said. She nodded, turned, and walked away, the sound of her footsteps fading under the laughter that slowly started up again. Trish joined me by the grill, voice low. That was surprisingly civil. "I'm evolving," I said, flipping a burger. "It's either that or therapy, and therapy doesn't come with ribs." She snorted. "You sure you're okay?" I looked at the smoke rising against the sky. "Yeah, for the first time, I think I actually am." She smiled, brushing a crumb off her shirt. "Good, because I brought pie, and I'm not taking it home." As the afternoon rolled on, the tension melted away. Laughter returned, stories flowed, and even Paul's terrible playlist somehow hit the right notes. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was just a man, a grill, and a second chance, surrounded by people who'd seen the worst and decided to show up anyway. When the sun dipped low, Trish leaned next to me and whispered, "You know, you might have started something here. The comeback cookout." I smiled. "Catchy. You should make it an annual thing. Only if you promise not to mention it on the neighborhood Facebook group. I don't need another headline." She laughed. "Fine. I'll just tell people it's a support group for emotionally roasted men." "Perfect," I said. "We'll serve therapy with barbecue sauce." As the last of the guests trickled out, I looked around at the yard, the same space where everything had fallen apart and somehow, everything had stitched itself back together. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine again. When I finally sat down, Trish Trish handed me the last cold beer from the cooler. To peace, she said. To starting over, I replied. We clinked bottles, the sound sharp and satisfying. The grill sizzled one last time, the smoke curling up into the twilight like a quiet thank you. And for once, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. If someone had told me 2 months ago that I'd end up barbecuing in peace, drinking beer with my ex-neighbor, and actually smiling like a man who didn't need therapy coupons, I'd have laughed right in their face. Yet here I was, same house, same grill, same suburban skyline. But somehow, everything was brand new. Life after marriage doesn't hit like a tidal wave. It creeps in like a breeze that smells suspiciously like freedom and lighter fluid. There's no grand soundtrack, no dramatic montage where you grow a beard and rebuild your identity with power tools. It's quieter than that. It's you, a cup of coffee, and the sudden realization that nobody's yelling because you bought the wrong brand of paper towels. Trish had become a constant. Not in a romantic comedy, cue the music kind of way, at least not yet, but in that real, practical, hey, I have extra coffee filters sort of way. She popped in, dropped off muffins, occasionally borrowed sugar again. I was convinced she had a stockpile by now, and slowly turned my once chaotic mornings into something resembling human life. It wasn't about replacement. It was about recovery. One evening, a week after the comeback cookout, she showed up holding a bottle of wine and that smirk that usually meant trouble disguised as small talk. You busy? I gestured toward the grill. I'm literally searing my dinner. You know, the sacred ritual of single manhood. She laughed and set the wine down on the patio table. Relax, chef therapy. I'm here for company, not a rescue mission. I poured her a glass, grabbed one for myself, and sat down. The sunset bled orange over the fence, the kind of cinematic backdrop that makes you think maybe the universe doesn't know what it's doing. You seem lighter, she said. I took a sip. Yeah, guess turning your house into an emotional war zone for years will make you appreciate silence. She leaned back, studying me. You ever think about her? Of course, I said. You don't just delete 8 years of marriage like spam mail. But now, when I think about her, it's like remembering a bad sitcom. You laugh, you cringe, and you're grateful it got canceled before another season. Trish chuckled. I'm stealing that. Go ahead, I said. Consider it community property. She smiled, but there was softness behind it. You know, your ex actually did me a favor. Oh yeah? Which part? The public auction or the emotional fallout? All of it, she said, swirling her wine. Because she gift-wrapped the perfect man and handed him to me. I snorted. Perfect? Me? I forget laundry in the dryer until it smells like disappointment. Sure, she said, laughing, but you also make killer burgers, don't lie to impress people, and your idea of a good time doesn't involve gossip or chaos. You're real. That's rare out here. I stared at her for a second, feeling something shift. Not big, not fireworks, just a quiet click, like the world aligning 1 degree closer to sense. Guess I really was a limited edition model. Exactly, she said. And I managed to snag the last one in stock. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to perform. As the night deepened, we talked about everything: bad dates, worse marriages, her Jeep constantly breaking down, and how she once accidentally joined a pyramid scheme because she thought she was signing up for a yoga class. By the time the bottle was empty, laughter had replaced the kind of silence that used to weigh heavy in this house. It felt easy, effortless. That's the thing nobody tells you about healing. It's not some grand emotional victory. It's small. It's the absence of dread. It's waking up and not checking your phone for damage control. It's cooking for 2 and realizing you're not nervous about saying the wrong thing. Later that week, I got a text from an unknown number. Heard you upgraded. Good for you. Ryan, Trisha's ex. I showed her the message when she came over that Friday night. She read it, snorted, and rolled her eyes. Oh, him. He still sends me memes about manifesting success. I guess he manifested me leaving. Should I respond? I asked. She grinned. Nah, let silence be your spokesperson. But she did text him back herself while I watched. Upgraded from toxic to terrific. Yeah, I'd say so. Then she tossed her phone on the couch and leaned back, smirking. There. Now it's official. I laughed, shaking my head. You're dangerous. And you like it, she said, eyes glinting. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few weeks, our lives just sort of merged. Not dramatically, not with labels or declarations, but naturally. She brought her cat over because he likes new vibes. I fixed her leaky kitchen faucet because YouTube confidence is a superpower. We swapped playlists, swapped stories, and one night, without any ceremony, swapped toothbrushes. It wasn't romance built on adrenaline or chaos. It was built on peace, which, frankly, is the sexiest thing I'd ever felt. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning the grill, again, apparently trauma makes you neat, she leaned against the fence watching me. You know, she said, you're not the same guy I met. Good different or bad different? I asked. She smiled. You've got this calm now. Like you finally believe you deserve to be happy. I paused, spatula in hand. Yeah, I guess I finally realized I don't have to earn peace by suffering first. She nodded. Took you long enough. I laughed. You sound like my therapist, if my therapist had better legs and made better coffee. Careful, she said. Flattery might get you more chores. We laughed again, but somewhere between the teasing and the sunlight and the smell of grilled perfection, I realized this. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Just comfort. Consistency. Laughter that didn't cost you dignity. When I think back to that first cookout, the trade-offer day, I can't help but smirk. It's poetic in a twisted kind of way. I started that day being auctioned off as low maintenance and unambitious, and somehow, that label turned out to be the best compliment I'd ever received. Turns out, low maintenance just means peaceful. Unambitious means content. And maybe that's the real prize in this mess. Not the win, but the quiet afterward. Later that night, as Trish and I sat on the porch, the air cool and calm, she reached for my hand. You think she ever realized what she lost? I thought about it for a moment. Probably. But by the time people realize the value of calm, they've already burned the bridge that led to it. Trish smiled faintly, resting her head on my shoulder. Well, her loss looks good on me. I chuckled. Yeah, it does. We sat there in silence for a while. Not the kind that fills space awkwardly, but the kind that settles in like an old friend. The crickets chirped. The streetlights flickered on. Somewhere, a car door slammed, followed by laughter. Life went on, and I finally felt like I was part of it again. Before heading in, I looked at her and said, you know what's crazy? I spent years thinking the best revenge was proving people wrong. And now, she asked, now I think the best revenge is peace, the kind that doesn't need an audience. She grinned. That's because you finally grew up. Or maybe I just finally stopped being the punchline, I said. She squeezed my hand. Same thing. As we went inside, I glanced back at the grill, the same one where everything had started, burned, and somehow come full circle. The coals glowed faintly, stubborn and alive, like they weren't quite ready to die out. Neither was I, because sometimes the trade you didn't see coming ends up being the one that saves your life. And standing there, next to the woman who'd seen me humiliated, rebuilt, and reborn, I couldn't help but think, yeah, the trade was a win. My wife said, let's put our marriage on hold, right before her 1-month business trip to Paris with her boss and co-workers. She slept with her boss at her trip thinking I wouldn't know and be home sulking like a lost puppy. But when she returned from her pause, she found I'd pressed play on a new life without her. Look, I've sat through some awkward dinners in my life. There was that time my mom served undercooked chicken and we all pretended food poisoning was just a coincidence. There was the Thanksgiving when Uncle Jerry announced he was joining a cult, right between the mashed potatoes and pumpkin pie. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the conversational grenade my wife lobbed across the dinner table on a random Tuesday night in our cramped apartment with the peeling wallpaper and that one light fixture that flickers like it's possessed. We weren't even at some fancy restaurant where dramatic announcements are practically encouraged, where the ambient lighting and overpriced wine give you permission to blow up your life with a side of truffle fries. Nope. We were at home, sitting on our IKEA chairs that we'd assembled wrong 3 years ago and never bothered to fix, eating leftover pasta that had seen better days, and our Wi-Fi was doing that thing where it pretends to work but actually just mocks your existence. You know, a completely normal evening in suburban purgatory. She was picking at her salad, which should have been my first clue that something was off because she attacks salad with the kind of enthusiasm most people reserve for lottery winnings. But that night, She was just stabbing at it, moving cherry tomatoes around like she was playing the world's most depressing game of checkers. I was halfway through my carbonara, trying to decide if reheated pasta could legally be considered a war crime, when she just said it. No preamble, no warning, no, hey, we need to talk, buffer zone that gives you at least 30 seconds to brace for impact. Let's put our marriage on hold for a while. I'm pretty sure I stopped chewing mid-bite. The words just hung there in the air between us. Floating somewhere near the dying potted plant, she kept insisting wasn't dead yet, just dormant. Put our marriage on hold. Like it was a Spotify subscription. Like we were a Netflix series she wanted to come back to later. Maybe, if nothing better was streaming. I blinked at her, a piece of pasta probably still visible in my half-open mouth, because I'm nothing if not attractive during emotional bombshells. On hold, I finally managed to say, my brain doing that thing where it tries to process information, but instead just plays elevator music. Like we're buffering? She had the audacity to sigh at me, this long-suffering exhale like I was the one being difficult, like I was the one who just suggested we hit pause on our entire relationship like it was a YouTube video. It's just for a month, she said, still murdering that salad with her fork. I'll be in Paris for work. My boss insists I go. It'll give us both some clarity. Clarity. That magical adult word that people throw around when what they really mean is, I want to do whatever I want without technically being the bad guy. It's like the grown-up version of it's not you, it's me, except with better vocabulary and probably wine tasting involved. She was going to Paris, the city of love and infidelity and overpriced baguettes, to find clarity about our marriage. Sure, made perfect sense. About as much sense as using a flamethrower to look for a gas leak. I should mention that this work trip had been mentioned exactly 0 times before this moment. No. Hey honey, my boss might send me to Paris. No, there's a possibility of international travel. Just straight from, what do you want for dinner, to I'm abandoning ship for 30 days, au revoir. For a second, I considered my options. I could argue. I could ask questions. I could demand to know when exactly this became a unilateral decision, when marriage turned into a democracy of one. I could have pointed out that my boss insists is code for, I want to, and I'm using work as an excuse because you can't argue with career opportunities. I could have mentioned that Paris in the spring is where marriages go to die, not find clarity. But you know what? I was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushingly tired of pretending that everything was fine when we both knew our marriage had been on life support for months, kept alive only by joint Netflix accounts and shared Amazon Prime. So instead, I did something she absolutely wasn't expecting. I smiled. Not a big smile, just this small, knowing curve of my lips that probably looked more unsettling than reassuring. Sure, I said, picking up my fork and twirling some more pasta. I'll just pause my emotional subscription then. Don't worry, I won't cancel the auto-renew. The confusion on her face was something I wish I'd photographed. She'd clearly spent time rehearsing this conversation in her head, probably in the shower or during her morning commute, playing out all the possible reactions. She'd prepared for tears. She'd braced herself for begging, maybe some light pleading, possibly a full-scale emotional meltdown complete with accusations, and that thing where I bring up stuff from 3 years ago that's technically irrelevant but feels important in the moment. She'd probably even practiced her sympathetic but firm face in the mirror, the one she uses when she's about to be cruel but wants to feel justified about it. What she hadn't prepared for was complete and utter acceptance. Casual, almost cheerful acceptance. The kind of response you give when someone asks if you want fries with that, not when your spouse announces they're hitting the pause button on your marriage to gallivant around Europe. I went back to my carbonara, which had gotten cold but honestly tasted better than the conversation. You want extra Parmesan? I asked, gesturing to the shaker on the table, the one we'd gotten as a wedding gift from her aunt who'd been divorced 3 times and clearly knew something we didn't. She just stared at me like I'd started speaking ancient Greek. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. If I didn't know better, I'd say she looked almost disappointed that I wasn't fighting for us, wasn't making this dramatic, wasn't giving her the big emotional scene that would have made her feel important, desired, worth the guilt she was clearly trying not to feel. But here's the thing about being in a relationship that's slowly suffocating you. Sometimes the moment you realize you can breathe again is the moment someone opens a window, even if they're climbing out of it. That night, watching her face cycle through confusion, frustration, and something that might have been regret, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Pure, unadulterated, better than Christmas morning relief. That was the night my freedom quietly clocked in for its shift. It didn't announce itself with fireworks or a brass band. It didn't require a dramatic speech or a thrown wine glass. It just showed up, pulled up a chair, and settled in like an old friend who'd been waiting outside for way too long. And honestly, it was about damn time. I'd been running on empty for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a full tank. She wanted clarity in Paris? Fine. I'd find mine right here, in this apartment with the flickering light and the wrong assembled furniture, eating cold pasta and finally feeling like maybe I could be okay. The rest of dinner passed in this weird, suspended silence. She kept glancing at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve, and I kept eating, wondering what the hell took me so long to realize that sometimes the best response to someone leaving is to let them go and lock the door behind them. The next few days were like living in some bizarre psychological experiment where I was both the lab rat and the scientist taking notes. She didn't just accept my calm response and move on with her Paris preparations like a normal person planning a trip. Oh no, that would have been too easy, too straightforward, too lacking in the kind of manufactured drama that had become our relationship's signature move. Instead, she kept testing me, poking at me like I was a sleeping bear she was trying to wake up, dropping little conversational grenades disguised as innocent observations about her upcoming adventure. The hotel has this amazing view of the Eiffel Tower, she'd mention casually while folding her clothes, watching me out of the corner of her eye like a hawk monitoring its prey. I'll probably spend a lot of evenings on the rooftop terrace with the team. She said team, the way other people say lottery winnings, with this breathy excitement that made my bullshit detector start screaming like a car alarm in a quiet neighborhood. Translation: unlimited wine, questionable boundaries with co-workers named Philippe or Jean-Luc, and zero accountability, because what happens in Paris stays in Paris, right? The unspoken subtext was so thick you could have spread it on toast. She wanted me to react, to get jealous, to show some sign that I cared about her gallivanting around the city of love while our marriage was apparently on pause like a podcast episode you'll definitely get back to eventually, but probably won't. But I just nodded and said, that sounds nice. Don't forget to take pictures. My voice was so even, so unbothered, that I could see it physically irritating her. Her jaw would tighten, her eyes would narrow just slightly, and she'd turn back to her packing with a little more force than necessary, shoving designer blouses into her suitcase like they'd personally offended her. Another day, she casually dropped, my boss said there might be some late-night brainstorming sessions. You know how creative work is. Ideas flow better after hours. She was testing the waters, seeing how much she could push, how far she could go before I'd snap and give her the reaction she was clearly craving. I just smiled and said, totally get it. Brainstorming at midnight in Paris. Very professional. Very normal. Hey, you want me to pack your laptop charger? The sarcasm was so subtle it was practically invisible, but I could tell it landed because she got this little crease between her eyebrows that only shows up when she realizes she's not getting what she wants. I played it cool through all of it. Hell, I didn't just play it cool. I became the Arctic Circle of emotional responses. I helped her pack her suitcase, carefully folding her clothes the way she liked them because apparently there's a wrong way to fold a sweater and I'd been doing it wrong for 7 years. I checked her travel documents, made sure her passport wasn't expired, even printed out her hotel confirmation because she claimed her phone was being weird, which is adult speak for, I don't want to deal with this. On the morning she was leaving, I wished her bon voyage with the kind of enthusiasm you'd use to wish someone a pleasant dentist appointment. I even tossed in travel-size hand sanitizer, a sleep mask, and some of those neck pillow things that never actually work but make you feel like you're prepared for anything. You know, I said, handing her the little care package, just in case of whatever happens in Paris. She looked at the hand sanitizer like it was either the sweetest gesture or the most passive-aggressive thing I'd ever done. Probably both. Thanks, she said, her voice small, maybe realizing for the first time that I wasn't going to fight for this, wasn't going to make it hard for her to leave, wasn't going to be the villain in whatever story she'd constructed to justify this whole mess. When her Uber pulled up, One of those two clean black sedans that cost twice what a normal ride should. I carried her bags down to the curb. The driver, a guy who looked like he'd seen every kind of relationship drama play out in his back seat, gave me a knowing nod. I watched her get in, watched the car pull away, watched it turn the corner and disappear like the last scene of a movie I'd stopped enjoying halfway through. Then I walked back inside, closed the door, and made myself a cup of coffee. Not the fancy French press stuff she insisted on, not the organic fair trade beans that cost more per pound than gold, just regular old drip coffee from the pot that I'd secretly kept in the back of the cupboard for emergencies. I leaned against the door, sipping that beautiful, terrible coffee, and thought to myself, well, let's see who really finds clarity here. The house felt different immediately. Not empty, not sad, just weirdly peaceful. Like when you finally turn off a TV that's been playing static in the background for so long you forgot it was even on. There were no passive-aggressive sighs about dishes in the sink. No lectures about my diet, my exercise routine, my life choices in general. No one rearranging my snacks in the pantry alphabetically by calorie count, because apparently that's a thing normal people do. That night, sitting on the couch in my underwear eating cereal for dinner because I could, I opened my phone and created a new list in my Notes app. I titled it Things to Do While My Marriage is on Pause, and just stared at the blank page for a minute. Then I typed the first item. Remember who I was before I had to ask permission to breathe. I saved it, locked my phone, and finished my cereal. Somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, my wife was probably sipping champagne and feeling liberated. And you know what? So was I. Funny how two people can want the same thing, but only one of them realizes they already had it. Day 3 without her, and I woke up at 10:30 in the morning with absolutely no one to judge me for it. No passive-aggressive comments about wasting the day or not being productive. Just me, my bed, and the kind of sleep you get when you're not stressed about someone analyzing your every move. I laid there for a solid 10 minutes, starfishing across the entire mattress because I could, taking up all the space like some kind of territorial animal reclaiming its habitat. Then I got up, shuffled to the kitchen in my boxers and that ratty college t-shirt she'd been trying to throw away for 3 years, and ordered pancakes from that diner down the street. Pancakes. At 11 in the morning. On a Wednesday. With extra syrup and a side of bacon, because why the hell not? When the delivery guy showed up, I answered the door, paid him, and took my beautiful stack of carb-loaded freedom back to the couch. I ate every single bite without one lecture about glycemic indexes, insulin spikes, or how I was poisoning my body with processed sugar. It was glorious. It was transcendent. It was possibly the best breakfast I'd had in years, and not just because the pancakes were good, but because they tasted like independence with a side of maple syrup. By day 5, I was feeling brave enough to reach out to the outside world, specifically to my best friend Trevor, the guy my wife had labeled a bad influence, with the kind of disdain usually reserved for convicted felons or people who don't recycle. Trevor's biggest crime, his most heinous offense against humanity? He owned a barbecue grill and had opinions. Strong opinions. About sports, about movies, about life in general. He said what he thought without running it through 7 filters of political correctness first, and apparently that made him dangerous to be around. She'd spent years trying to minimize my time with him, always scheduling things during our planned hangouts, always having some emergency that required my immediate attention whenever I mentioned grabbing a beer with him. But she was in Paris, probably sipping wine on some rooftop and pretending to brainstorm, so I called him. The phone barely rang twice before he picked up. Dude, are you alive? I was starting to think you'd been kidnapped or joined a monastery or something. Neither, I said, grinning at nothing in particular. Just been married. But I've got news. I told him about the pause, about Paris, about the whole, we need clarity speech that had turned into the best accidental gift I'd received in years. When I finished, there was this moment of silence, and then Trevor burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but full-on, gasping for air, probably disturbing his neighbor's laughter that went on for a solid 30 seconds. Buddy, he finally managed to say, that's not a pause. That's a pre-download for a breakup. She's literally beta testing the single life before committing to the full release. I thought about that for a second, spinning my coffee mug on the counter. Cool, I said. I'll upgrade to the premium version then. The one called Peace. Trevor lost it again, and honestly, It felt good to laugh with someone who wasn't constantly monitoring my emotional temperature or analyzing my responses for hidden meaning. Dude, we're going out for drinks, he declared. Tonight. No excuses. No checking in. No asking permission. You're a free man for a month, minimum, and we're celebrating your parole. And here's the thing, the really sad, pathetic thing that I didn't realize until that exact moment. I said yes without fear. Without that immediate anxiety spike that came from wondering how I'd be interrogated later. Without mentally preparing my defense for why I wanted to spend time with my own friend. I just said yes, like a normal human being making normal social plans, and it felt revolutionary. 7 o'clock, Trevor said. Miller's Tavern. Or something that isn't approved by the fashion police. I hung up and looked around my apartment, really looked at it for the first time in days. It wasn't cleaner or messier than usual. It wasn't decorated differently. Nothing physical had changed. But it felt different, lighter somehow, like someone had opened all the windows and let out air that had gone stale without anyone noticing. I hadn't realized how many questions I'd been asking over the years. May I go out with friends? May I order the burger instead of the salad? May I watch the game? May I exist in a way that doesn't conform to your exact specifications for how a husband should behave? Turns out, permission is addictive in the worst way. You start asking for it. Then you need it. Then you can't function without it. Until one day you wake up and realize you've outsourced your entire decision-making process to someone else. It's like those people who can't fall asleep without white noise or a specific pillow. Except instead of a pillow, it's another person's approval, and instead of sleep, it's your entire life. Going cold turkey from that. Best decision I never knew I was making. That night, getting ready to meet Trevor, I put on jeans with a hole in the knee and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the guy looking back at me. Not because I looked different, but because I looked comfortable, relaxed, like myself, whoever that was. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and walked out the door without checking my phone for texts, without sending a courtesy message about where I was going, without seeking permission from anyone. Freedom, I realized, tastes a hell of a lot better than Parisian wine. A week into her Parisian adventure, my phone buzzed with a text that radiated fake enthusiasm so strongly I could practically smell the bullshit through the screen. Settled in. Paris is magical. The architecture is breathtaking and the food is incredible. 3 exclamation points. That's how you know someone's trying too hard to convince themselves they're having a good time, or more likely, trying to make you think they're having a good time. Like posting, living my best life, on social media while crying in a Target bathroom. I stared at the message for a minute, debating my response options. I could go with the classic, "That's great, honey," which would be lying. I could hit her with "cool story, bro," which would be honest, but maybe too aggressive. Instead, I went with something right in the middle, perfectly calibrated to match her energy, while subtly letting her know I was doing just fine without her reality show updates. So is my couch. Fewer baguettes, same emotional distance. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately muted the conversation because I didn't need to see her response. Whatever it was, it would either be defensiveness disguised as hurt feelings or confusion disguised as concern, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to decode her emotional hieroglyphics anymore. Then came the silence. 3 full days of absolutely nothing from her end, which was fascinating considering she usually texted me about 17 times a day about everything from traffic patterns to whether we needed more paper towels. The silence spoke volumes, entire encyclopedias worth of subtext that I didn't need a translation guide to understand. She was either furious, guilty, or busy, and my money was on some combination of all 3. But here's the beautiful thing about the digital age and my wife's complete inability to understand privacy settings. Her Instagram stories were still visible to me. She'd probably forgotten I could see them, too caught up in her Parisian fantasy to remember that her husband back home had access to the highlight reel of her business trip. And what a highlight reel it was turning into. Day 8. A story of her hotel room with champagne on ice and the caption, "Celebrating a successful meeting," at 11 p.m. Right, because that's when all the important business celebrating happens, definitely not when you're partying. Day 9. A blurry video of what appeared to be a hotel bar, lots of people laughing, glasses clinking, and if I wasn't mistaken, That was definitely her voice in the background saying something in terrible French that probably translated to more wine. Please, I'm trying to forget I have responsibilities. Day 10. This was the good one. A photo of a rooftop party, string lights everywhere, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the background like it was personally endorsing her poor life choices. And there, right in the center, was my wife on a table. Not near a table. On a table. Dancing. With what appeared to be her entire work team, cheering her on like she'd just scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl of questionable decisions. I was at the gym when I saw that one, taking a break between sets, and I must have made some kind of noise because Carter, this guy I'd been chatting with over the past few weeks, looked over from the bench press. "You good, man?" I showed him the screen, and Carter, bless him, squinted at it for a second before his face broke into this huge grin. "Dude, isn't that your wife dancing on a table?" I zoomed in slightly, examining the photo with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for crime scene evidence. There she was, arms in the air, shoes off, that designer dress she'd spent $300 on hiked up probably higher than she'd realize when she sobered up, surrounded by her co-workers including at least two guys who looked way too comfortable standing that close to a married woman. "No," I said, keeping my voice completely deadpan. "That's her research presentation. Very avant-garde. Very cutting edge." The table dancing really emphasizes the quarterly projections. Carter lost it. Just absolutely lost it. Laughing so hard, he had to sit down on the weight bench before he hurt himself. And the thing was, I started laughing too. Not the bitter, angry laugh of a betrayed husband, but genuine, from-the-gut laughter at the sheer absurdity of it all. Here was my wife, living her best eat, pray, love fantasy in Paris, probably telling herself this was all about finding clarity and personal growth, when really she was just doing what people do when they want to act single without technically being single, getting drunk, dancing on furniture, and pretending the rules don't apply when you're in a different time zone. "Man, I'm sorry," Carter said, wiping his eyes. "That's rough." "Nah," I said, tucking my phone back in my pocket. "It's actually kind of perfect. Nothing says I need space to work on myself, like table dancing in front of your boss and coworkers named Philippe or whatever." We both cracked up again, and I realized something important. I wasn't hurt. Not really. Maybe I should have been. Maybe a better husband, a more invested partner, would have felt something sharp and painful seeing his wife clearly having the time of her life without him. But all I felt was this weird sense of vindication, like watching someone dig their own grave while you're safely on the sidelines with popcorn. Funny thing was, she probably thought she was living her best life over there, sipping overpriced wine and pretending that dancing on hotel furniture was somehow empowering or liberating. Meanwhile, I was back home actually rebuilding my life, one workout at a time, one friend at a time, one day of not asking permission at a time. She was in Paris collecting Instagram stories and hangovers. I was collecting dumbbells and self-respect. Guess we were both finding clarity after all, just not the kind she'd expected. I finished my workout that day with a new personal record on the deadlift, and when I got home, I didn't check her Instagram again. Didn't need to. I already knew how that story ended, and spoiler alert, it wasn't with her and me riding off into the sunset together. It was with me, my couch, and the beautiful sound of absolutely nobody telling me what to do. Monday morning rolled around with that particular brand of existential dread that only Mondays can provide, except this time I didn't feel it. No knot in my stomach about going back to work, no anxiety about what fresh hell the week would bring, no sense of impending doom that had been my constant companion for the past couple years. Instead, I woke up with something that felt suspiciously like purpose, which was weird and unsettling and also kind of great. I had an appointment at 9 a.m. with Richard Caldwell, a divorce attorney whose name Trevor had given me over beers at Miller's Tavern 3 nights earlier. "Just talk to him," Trevor had said, sliding the business card across the beer sticky table. "You don't have to do anything. Just know your options. Knowledge is power, my friend. And right now you're operating in the dark while she's literally dancing on tables in Paris." The law office was in one of those buildings downtown that tries really hard to look expensive and prestigious, but just ends up looking like every other office building with slightly better elevator music. I took the lift to the 7th floor, found Suite 702, and walked into a waiting room that smelled like leather furniture and broken dreams. The receptionist, A woman in her 50s with the kind of smile that suggested she'd seen every variety of marital disaster imaginable, told me Mr. Caldwell would be right with me. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Richard Caldwell himself, and I have to say, he was not what I expected. I'd pictured some slick corporate shark in a three-piece suit, the kind of guy who probably had his own Wikipedia page and charged $500 just to make eye contact. Instead, I got a guy in his early 40s wearing khakis and a golf shirt, with the emotional energy of a golden retriever who'd just been told he was a good boy. He had this warm, almost goofy smile that immediately put me at ease, which I guess was probably the point. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair with his hands behind his head like we were about to discuss fantasy football instead of the potential dissolution of my marriage. "Trevor tells me you're in an interesting situation. Wife's in Paris. You're wondering what comes next. Tell me everything, and don't worry about sounding petty or bitter. I've heard it all, trust me. Last week I had a guy who wanted to divorce his wife because she alphabetized his spice rack without permission. I laughed, which felt good, and then I told him everything. The dinner table announcement, the pause that wasn't really a pause, the Instagram stories of table dancing and champagne, the way she'd been testing me before she left to see if I'd react. I told him about the emotional distance that had been growing between us for years, how I'd slowly become someone who asked permission to exist, how this whole Paris trip felt less like a work obligation and more like a trial separation with better wine. Richard listened to all of it, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes on a legal pad, but mostly just giving me his full attention in a way that felt almost therapeutic. When I finished, he tapped his pen against the notepad a few times, thinking. "Okay," he finally said. "Here's what I'm hearing. She wanted space, you gave it to her, and now she's in Paris living her best life while you're here rediscovering yours. You're not angry, you're not devastated, you're just done. Am I close?" "Uncomfortably close," I admitted. He grinned. "Good. That makes this easier. Look, I'm not going to tell you to get divorced. That's your call, and only your call. But what I'm going to tell you is this. You should know your options, and you should document everything. Those Instagram stories. Screenshot them. Any texts where she talks about late-night meetings or rooftop parties. Save them. I'm not saying you'll need them, but if this clarity she's looking for involves hotel receipts and a coworker named Philippe, you'll want to have your ducks in a row." "That sounds ominous," I said. "That sounds practical," he corrected. "Here's the thing about marriage law. It's complicated, it's messy, and it almost always favors whoever comes prepared. You've got a prenup, right?" "Yeah, we signed one before the wedding. Her idea, actually. She made more money than me back then and wanted to protect her assets." Richard's grin got wider. "Oh, this is beautiful. So she protected herself from you, and now that protection might end up working in your favor. The universe has a sense of humor, I swear. Look, I'm not saying you should do anything right now. You're not ready, and that's fine. But come back and see me in a couple weeks. In the meantime, document everything. Don't engage in any big emotional conversations over text. And for the love of God, don't let her convince you that you're the bad guy here if this thing goes south." We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, timelines, and what a divorce would actually look like if it came to that. By the time I left his office, I didn't feel scared or anxious or even sad. I just felt informed, which was a hell of a lot better than feeling helpless. I wasn't planning revenge or plotting some grand scheme to hurt her back. I was just planning boundaries, the kind that come with legal signatures and official documentation. On the way home, I stopped at this little coffee shop I'd never been to before, one of those hipster places with exposed brick and baristas who take their coffee way too seriously. I ordered a latte, found a seat by the window, and just sat there for a while, watching people walk by, living their lives, dealing with their own drama. And I realized something sitting there with my overpriced coffee. Coffee tastes better when it's not brewed with resentment. When you're not drinking it while mentally preparing for another day of walking on eggshells, another day of being someone you're not, another day of pretending everything is fine when it's obviously not. This coffee, this simple, probably too expensive latte, tasted like freedom, like possibility, like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. I pulled out my phone and added a new item to my list. Remember that happiness is a choice, and I'm choosing me. Then I finished my coffee, tossed the cup in the recycling bin like a responsible adult, and walked home feeling lighter than I had in years. Halfway through her Parisian escapade, something shifted in the atmosphere of our text exchanges, like when the weather suddenly changes and you can feel the storm coming before you see the clouds. The texts started coming more frequently, and more importantly, they started sounding different. Gone were the exclamation points and the Paris is magical energy. Instead, I got what I can only describe as guilt trying to wear a disguise made of emojis and casual affection. Miss You Red Heart popped up on my screen at 2 in the morning my time, which meant it was 8 a.m. in Paris. She was probably hungover, staring at her hotel room ceiling, having one of those morning after moments of clarity where you suddenly remember you have a whole life back home that you've been conveniently ignoring while pretending to be a carefree European socialite. I stared at the message for a solid 5 minutes, coffee in hand, sitting on my couch in the same spot where she dropped the pause bomb on me. The audacity of that little heart emoji was almost impressive. Like she could just drop a miss you with a heart and expect me to forget that 2 weeks ago she'd essentially put our marriage in airplane mode so she could explore her options without technical difficulties. I didn't respond right away. Let it marinate. Let her wonder if I was sleeping, busy, or just didn't care enough to reply immediately like I used to, back when I dropped everything the second her name appeared on my screen. The next day brought another gem. Long meetings today. Wish you were here. The irony was so thick you could have served it at a French bistro. She wished I was there. Really? Because I distinctly remembered not being invited to this little clarity-seeking adventure. I remembered being told to stay home and think about our relationship while she gallivanted around Paris having late-night brainstorming sessions and dancing on tables like she was auditioning for a reality show called The Real Housewives of Midlife Crisis. Translation: something went wrong, and guilt has entered the chat. Maybe one of those co-workers she'd been getting too comfortable with had turned out to be less charming than anticipated. Maybe the hotel bills were piling up and reality was starting to seep through the champagne haze. Maybe she'd caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror and realized that running away from your problems in designer clothes doesn't actually solve them. It just makes them more expensive. I replied with the kind of message that would make a therapist proud and probably give her an aneurysm. Hope your meeting went well. Remember sunscreen. Short, polite, completely devoid of the emotional engagement she was fishing for. No, I miss you too. No, can't wait to see you. Just a practical reminder about UV protection, because skin cancer doesn't care about marital drama. Trevor called that afternoon, and I told him about the new development in our tech saga. Dude, he said, and I could hear him grinning through the phone. You're colder than an ex's heart in February. I'm genuinely impressed. You've achieved a level of emotional detachment that usually requires years of therapy or a lobotomy. I laughed, sprawled out on my couch with a protein shake and the kind of contentment that comes from not giving a damn. Nah, I said, just emotionally vaccinated. Got my shots, built up immunity. Can't catch feelings when you've developed antibodies against bullshit. The texts kept coming though, like she was on some kind of guilt-driven mission to crack through my newly constructed walls of indifference. The weather's been beautiful, but it would be better with you here. Tried this amazing restaurant. You would have loved it. Keep thinking about that time we talked about visiting Paris together, remember? Each message was a little fishing expedition, casting different lures to see which one I'd bite on. But here's what she didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly grasp because she'd been too busy finding herself in a city built for lovers while ignoring the actual person she'd promised to love. I'd already moved on emotionally. Not to someone else, but to something better. To myself. To the version of me that existed before I'd become someone who needed permission to be happy. She started calling too, which was a whole new level of desperate. Late-night calls where her voice had that shaky quality, like she'd been crying or was about to start. The first time she called, I almost didn't answer, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But curiosity won out, so I picked up. Hey, she said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like regret trying to disguise itself as homesickness. I just wanted to hear your voice. Is that okay? I leaned back against the couch cushions, staring at the ceiling. Sure, I said, my voice neutral, like she was a telemarketer asking if I had a minute to talk about my car's extended warranty. How's Paris? It's fine. Good. I mean, it's beautiful, but... She trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence, to ask what was wrong. to give her an opening to unload whatever guilt or confusion or second thoughts she was having. I didn't. I just waited, listening to her breathe on the other end of the line, probably sitting on that hotel room bed with the Eiffel Tower view she'd been so excited about, realizing that Instagram-worthy scenery doesn't fill the void of poor life choices. I should go, she finally said. Early meeting tomorrow. Okay, I said. Take care. That's it. Just take care? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. You wanted space. I'm giving you the Eiffel Tower of it. All 300 meters of it. There was a pause, long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then she said, her voice small and confused, "You've changed." Yeah, I agreed. Funny how that works when you're not constantly trying to be someone you're not. Good night. I hung up before she could respond, set my phone face down on the coffee table, and went back to the book I'd been reading. She didn't laugh at my Eiffel Tower joke, but I did. And honestly, that was all that mattered. Somewhere in Paris, my wife was probably having another one of those moments where she realized that actions have consequences and dramatic gestures sometimes backfire spectacularly. Meanwhile, I was home, in sweatpants, reading a book about woodworking and feeling more at peace than I had in years. She could keep her Parisian clarity. I'd found mine right here, 3,000 miles away, in the simple act of not giving a damn anymore. 2 weeks into what was supposed to be a month-long journey of self-discovery and corporate brainstorming, my phone lit up with a text that had all the subtle warning signs of an incoming disaster. Flying back early. We need to talk. No emoji. No exclamation point. No can't wait to see you. Or miss you so much. Just that ominous phrase that has probably preceded every difficult conversation in human history. We need to talk. I screenshot the message and sent it to Trevor, who responded within seconds with a series of laughing emojis followed by, "Guess the vacation Wi-Fi ran out." I was sitting at my newly acquired woodworking table, sanding down a piece of oak I was turning into a bookshelf, and I actually laughed out loud. Not a bitter laugh, not an angry laugh, just genuine amusement at the predictability of it all. Or the guilt did. I texted back, brushing sawdust off my phone screen. The thing about dramatic exits is that they require equally dramatic returns, and apparently my wife hadn't thought that part through when she'd booked her early flight home. She'd probably imagined swooping back into our apartment, transformed by her Parisian experience, ready to fix everything or end everything or whatever she decided during her wine-soaked soul-searching sessions. What she probably hadn't anticipated was walking back into an apartment that no longer felt like hers, facing a husband who'd spent the last 2 weeks becoming someone she didn't recognize. I didn't offer to pick her up from the airport. When she texted asking if I could get her, I responded with, "Uber's pretty reliable these days. Safe travels." Short, practical, and completely void of the eager-to-please energy I used to radiate whenever she needed something. The old me would have rearranged my entire day, left work early, probably brought flowers to the arrival's gate like some kind of rom-com protagonist welcoming his beloved home. The new me? The new me had a woodworking project to finish and absolutely zero interest in playing the part of the devoted husband for someone who'd literally asked to put our marriage on pause. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, her Uber pulling up outside our building at exactly 3:15. I know because I was watching from the window, coffee in hand, curious to see what version of her would emerge from that car. And let me tell you, she looked different. Not different in a good way or a bad way, just different. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, expensive-looking stuff that screamed, "I went shopping in Paris to fill the void." Her hair was styled differently, more sophisticated maybe, more European. She had on sunglasses even though it was overcast, which is the universal signal for, I either have a hangover or I've been crying or both. I watched her struggle with her luggage for a moment. That massive suitcase she'd packed so carefully 2 weeks ago, now looking even more stuffed, probably full of guilt purchases and souvenirs from a trip that hadn't gone the way she'd planned. Part of me, a very small part that still remembered being married to this person, considered going down to help her. But the larger part, the part that had spent 2 weeks rediscovering what it felt like to not be constantly managing someone else's emotions, stayed right where I was. When she finally made it up to our apartment, fumbling with her keys like she wasn't quite sure she still had the right to use them, I opened the door before she could. We stood there for a second, her on one side of the threshold with her luggage and her new Parisian wardrobe, Me on the other side in my work jeans and a t-shirt covered in sawdust. "Hey," she said, and her voice had this quality to it like she was testing the waters, trying to gauge what kind of reception she was going to get. "Welcome back," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "How was the flight?" She wheeled her suitcase inside, and I watched her take in the apartment, her eyes scanning everything like a detective looking for clues. And there were plenty to find. The living room was cleaner than it had been in months, but not in the way she used to clean it, all sterile and magazine-ready. It was lived-in clean, comfortable clean. My gym equipment was set up in one corner, weights organized on a rack I'd built myself. The dining table, where she'd dropped her marriage-pausing bomb, now had my woodworking plans spread across it, sketches and measurements and half-finished projects. "You've been busy," she said, and there was something in her tone I couldn't quite place. Surprise? Jealousy? Regret? Yeah. Turns out I have a lot more free time when I'm not constantly worried about someone else's emotional temperature. I said it casually, like I was commenting on the weather, but I saw it land. Saw her flinch just slightly. Saw her expensive new sunglasses come off to reveal eyes that looked tired and confused and maybe a little scared. She walked further into the apartment, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor, stopping at the woodworking table I'd set up where her precious decorative console used to be. "You moved my furniture," she said, and it sounded almost like an accusation. "You moved to Paris," I countered. I figured we were both making changes. She turned to look at me then, really look at me, and I could see her brain trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't the husband she'd left behind, the one who would have been anxiously waiting for her return, desperate to know if she'd found her clarity, ready to do whatever it took to save the marriage. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd built a bookshelf. Someone who had sawdust in his hair and didn't care. Someone who looked comfortable, settled, at peace. "You've changed," she said, and it was almost an echo of what she'd said on the phone a few days ago. "Yeah," I agreed, moving to the kitchen to refill my coffee. Happens when you actually have space to grow instead of being pruned into someone else's idea of what you should be. I poured myself a cup, held up the pot. "Want some?" Fair warning though, it's not that fancy French press stuff you like. Just regular coffee. The kind that doesn't require an instruction manual. She shook her head, still looking around like she'd walked into the wrong apartment. "The place looks different. Brighter somehow. Turns out natural light gets in better when you're not constantly walking on eggshells in the dark." I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee, watching her process everything. She'd probably rehearsed this homecoming 100 times in her head during those long Paris nights. Maybe she'd imagined me breaking down, begging her to stay, promising to change. Or maybe she'd imagined herself making some grand declaration, either ending things dramatically or sweeping back into my life with newfound appreciation. What she clearly hadn't imagined was this: complete and utter indifference wrapped in politeness. She set her purse down on the couch, the same couch where I'd been sleeping better than I had in years. "I made a mistake," she started, and I held up my hand. "Let me stop you right there," I said, setting my coffee down. "Before you launch into whatever speech you've been preparing, you should probably know something." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the folder Richard Caldwell had given me, the one with his business card clipped to the front. I didn't open it, just held it, let her see it. Her eyes went wide. "You hired a lawyer?" "I talked to a lawyer," I corrected. "There's a difference. Talking is information gathering. Hiring is action. But yeah, I wanted to know my options. You know, in case this whole clarity thing you were searching for ended up being clarity about wanting out." "I wasn't," she started, but I cut her off again. "Don't," I said, and my voice was gentle but firm, the way you'd talk to a child trying to lie about eating cookies when there's chocolate on their face. I saw the Instagram stories. The table dancing, the champagne, the rooftop parties with your very attentive coworkers. You forgot I could still see them. So before you tell me what you were or weren't doing, maybe just skip to the part where you explain why you're back 2 weeks early from your month-long clarity vacation. She looked like I'd slapped her, her face going through this rapid series of expressions: shock, guilt, defensiveness, and finally something that might have been shame. "Those were just team bonding exercises," she said weakly. "It wasn't what it looked like." "Right?" I said, nodding like I totally believed her. "Team bonding. On tables. At midnight. With champagne. Very professional. Very normal." I'm sure HR would have been thrilled. The silence that followed was the kind that fills up a room and pushes all the oxygen out. She stood there in her expensive new outfit, looking like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. And I stood there in my sawdust-covered clothes, feeling more in control of my life than I had in years. Look, I finally said, you wanted space. You wanted clarity. You got it. So did I. And here's what I figured out during my clarity period. I like who I am when I'm not constantly trying to be who you want me to be. I like waking up without anxiety. I like making pancakes at 11 a.m. without getting a lecture about carbs. I like having friends without needing permission. I like building things with my hands and going to the gym and existing without a running commentary on everything I'm doing wrong. She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. So whatever you came back here to say, whatever you decided in Paris between the wine tastings and the table dancing, you should know that I've already made my decision. And it's got nothing to do with revenge or hurt feelings or wanting to punish you. It's just about choosing peace over drama and myself over whatever this has become. When I finally stopped talking, she just stood there, and I could see it dawning on her that she'd lost something she hadn't even realized she'd been gambling with. She'd thought the marriage was on pause, like a video game you could just pick up where you left off. What she didn't understand was that I'd used that pause button to realize I didn't want to keep playing. We sat down across from each other like two diplomats about to negotiate a peace treaty nobody actually wanted. She took the armchair, the one she'd always claimed as hers, the one with the perfect angle to the TV and the best lighting for reading. I took the couch, sprawling out in a way that probably looked more relaxed than I felt. But at this point, perception was reality, and I was committed to the bit. She sighed, and it was one of those dramatic exhales that's designed to communicate deep emotional turmoil without actually having to use words. The kind of sigh that says, look how much I'm suffering, while simultaneously absolving yourself of any actual responsibility for that suffering. I'd seen this sigh before, deployed strategically during arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes or why I couldn't just read her mind about what restaurant she wanted to go to. I made a mistake, she said, and her voice had this rehearsed quality to it, like she'd practiced this line in front of the bathroom mirror in her Parisian hotel room. Probably multiple times. Probably with different inflections to see which one sounded most sincere. Only one, I said, and I couldn't help myself. The sarcasm just slipped out, smooth and easy, like it had been waiting for exactly this moment to make its debut. Impressive. Most people rack up at least 3 or 4 during a 2-week clarity vacation in Paris. She shot me a look, one of those glares that used to make me backtrack and apologize and try to smooth things over. But that was the old me, the guy who thought keeping the peace was more important than having a backbone. The new me just raised my eyebrows and waited for her to continue. I mean the pause, she clarified, her jaw tight. It was stupid. The whole thing was stupid. Yeah, I agreed, nodding like a therapist validating a patient's breakthrough. Pauses are great for movies, not marriages. You can't just freeze-frame real life. Go have an adventure and expect everything to be exactly where you left it when you come back. Life's not Netflix. There's no resume button. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and I could see her getting ready to deploy the tears. I'd seen this move before too. Usually right before she wanted something or needed to win an argument, she was clearly losing. Her eyes got shiny, her lips started to quiver just slightly, and she looked down at her hands like they held the secrets of the universe. But here's the thing about emotional manipulation. It only works if the person you're manipulating still cares enough to be manipulated. And I'd spent the last 2 weeks building up an immunity to her particular brand of guilt-inducing performance art. The first tear fell, rolling down her cheek in a way that would have been devastating 2 weeks ago. Now it just looked calculated, practiced, like she'd watched too many romantic dramas and thought real life worked the same way. You don't seem upset, she said, her voice breaking just slightly on the word upset, and there was genuine confusion in her tone. Like she couldn't comprehend how I wasn't falling apart, wasn't begging her to stay, wasn't promising to be better or do better or whatever she'd expected from me. I took a sip of my coffee, which had gone lukewarm but still tasted better than this conversation. I said honestly. At first, that night you dropped the pause bomb over leftover pasta? Yeah, I was upset, confused, angry. All the standard emotions you're supposed to feel when your spouse announces they're putting your marriage in airplane mode. I paused, watching her watch me, and I could see her waiting for the but that would signal I'd forgiven her, that we could move past this, that everything would go back to normal. But then I remembered something. I continued, and this was the part I'd been waiting to say, the words I'd been rehearsing in my own bathroom mirror. I like peace more than panic. I like waking up without that knot in my stomach wondering what I did wrong, or what mood you're going to be in, or whether today's the day I say the wrong thing and trigger World War III over something completely innocuous, like suggesting we get pizza instead of salad. Her tears stopped, just like that, like I'd flipped a switch. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by something harder, sharper. "That's not fair," she said. "I wasn't that bad. You asked me to pause our marriage so you could fly to Paris and find clarity," I said, my voice level and calm. "You danced on tables at midnight with coworkers while posting it to social media that you forgot I could see. You sent me guilty texts at 2 in the morning saying you missed me while simultaneously living your best single life in the most romantic city in the world. So maybe not that bad is relative, and we have very different definitions of what constitutes reasonable behavior in a committed relationship." She opened her mouth to respond, probably with some rationalization about how I was twisting things or taking them out of context or how those Instagram stories didn't mean what they clearly meant. But I wasn't done yet. I reached over to the coffee table and picked up the folder again, the one with Richard Caldwell's business card prominently displayed. I set it down between us, right in the middle of the coffee table, like a chess player making a decisive move. "You met with a lawyer," she said again, and this time her voice had an edge to it. Not sadness, anger, like I was the one who'd done something wrong by protecting myself, while she was off finding clarity in champagne bottles and hotel rooftops. "I talked to a lawyer," I corrected again, because apparently we needed to be very precise about terminology here. "And you know what he told me? He said I'm doing great. He said a guy whose wife asks for a pause and then flies to Paris to party with her boss is not the problem in the relationship. He said I should document everything, just in case your clarity involved more than just soul-searching and architecture appreciation." Her face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if this wasn't my actual life imploding in slow motion. Shock, then anger, then something that looked suspiciously like fear, then back to anger again. "You're really just giving up?" she asked, and there it was, the accusation I'd been waiting for. Because in her mind, this was me giving up, me quitting, me being the bad guy who wouldn't fight for the marriage. Never mind that she was the one who'd asked for the pause. Never mind that she was the one who'd chosen Paris over us. In her version of events, I was the one abandoning ship. "No," I said, and I leaned forward too, mirroring her posture, looking her straight in the eyes. "I'm giving back. All the control you took. All the times you made me feel like I needed permission to be myself. All the lectures about what I ate and who I saw and how I spent my time. All the passive-aggressive comments and the sighs and the looks that made me feel like I was constantly failing some test I didn't even know I was taking." I stood up then, because sitting felt like I was still playing by her rules, still participating in a dynamic where she got to control the conversation. I walked over to the window, looked out at the street below where regular people were doing regular things, living regular lives that probably didn't involve this level of drama. "Here's the thing you don't seem to understand," I said, still facing the window because it was easier to say this without looking at her. "You thought you were taking a break from me, but what you actually did was give me a break from you. And I realized something during that break. I realized that I've been so busy trying to be the husband you wanted that I forgot to be the person I am. And that person? He's actually pretty decent. He likes building stuff with his hands. He has friends who make him laugh. He can eat pancakes at 11 a.m. without an ethics debate about simple carbohydrates." I turned back to face her, and she was staring at me like I was a stranger, which was fair because in a lot of ways I was. The person standing in front of her wasn't the same guy who'd smiled and said sure when she announced her Paris plans. That guy had been tired and worn down and willing to accept whatever scraps of affection she threw his way. This guy? This guy had spent 2 weeks remembering what self-respect felt like. "So when you ask if I'm giving up," I continued, "what you're really asking is whether I'm willing to go back to being the person who asks permission to breathe. And the answer is no. Hard no. That version of me is retired." He put in his notice, cleaned out his desk, and left without a forwarding address. She stood up too, and for a second I thought she might actually leave, just walk out and make this whole thing easier. But instead, she tried one more angle, one more approach. "What about counseling?" she asked, and her voice had shifted again, now going for reasonable and solution-oriented. "We could try therapy. Work on things. I know I messed up, but we've been together for 7 years. That has to mean something." "It does mean something," I agreed. "It means I spent 7 years slowly losing myself in someone else's expectations. And now I've spent 2 weeks finding myself again. So you're asking me if I want to go to counseling to fix what's broken, and I'm telling you that what's broken is the entire foundation of how we relate to each other." I walked back to the couch, sat down, and looked at her standing there in her expensive Paris outfit, looking lost and confused and maybe, for the first time, understanding that she'd played a game and lost without even realizing she was gambling. "I think you should stay somewhere else tonight," I said quietly. "Maybe with your friend Melissa. Or get a hotel. But I need space now. Real space. Not the fake Paris kind where you're just testing the waters. The kind where we both figure out what we actually want instead of what we think we're supposed to want." She didn't cry again. Didn't argue. She just stood there for a long moment, and I could see the gears turning in her head, calculating her next move, trying to figure out how to salvage this. But there was nothing to salvage. The marriage she'd put on pause had expired while she was gone, like milk left out too long on a warm counter. "I'll pack a bag," she finally said, her voice small and defeated. I nodded and watched her walk to the bedroom, heard her opening drawers and closet doors, the sounds of someone packing for a trip they never planned to take. And sitting there on the couch, in the apartment that finally felt like mine again, I didn't feel sad or angry or even vindicated. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you don't even notice how much it weighs until you finally put it down. The week following our conversation was like living through the final season of a show that had already been canceled but still had episodes left to air. Everyone knew how it was going to end, but we all had to go through the motions anyway. She stayed in the apartment that first night, taking the guest bedroom that had basically become a storage room for things we didn't use but couldn't bring ourselves to throw away. Kind of fitting, actually. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, and when I checked my phone, there was a text saying she was staying with her friend Rachel for a while. Rachel, the same friend who'd encouraged her to explore her options and find herself, and all those other fortune cookie phrases that basically translate to blow up your life and see what happens. I texted back a thumbs up emoji and went about my day, which now included an uninterrupted morning routine that felt like a luxury I hadn't known I was missing. But she wasn't going quietly into that good night. Oh no. The voicemail started almost immediately, a greatest hits collection of emotional manipulation spanning the full range of human desperation. The first one came at 11 a.m. "Hey, it's me. I know you're probably busy, but can we talk? Like really talk? I think there are things we need to say to each other." Her voice had that carefully constructed casual tone that was supposed to sound spontaneous, but had clearly been rehearsed. I deleted it without responding. By 3 p.m., I got another one. "I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I know I messed up. Can we please just meet for coffee? Just coffee. No pressure. I promise." The promise at the end was almost cute, like she thought her promises still held currency in my world. Deleted. That evening brought the anger phase. "You know what? You're really just giving up? After everything? After 7 years? I thought you were stronger than this. I thought you actually cared about us." The irony of her accusing me of giving up when she was the one who'd literally flown to another country to escape our marriage was so thick you could have built furniture out of it. Deleted. The next day cycled through variations of the same themes. Sadness. I miss you. I miss us. I miss who we were together. Bargaining. What if we tried counseling? What if we gave it another shot? People work through worse than this. Guilt. How can you just throw away everything we built? Don't those years mean anything to you? Each voicemail got added to my new collection, a digital museum of someone slowly realizing that the world doesn't stop spinning just because you decided to step off. I didn't respond to any of them. My new rule, courtesy of Richard Caldwell's sage advice, was simple: no communication after emotional combustion. Every conversation was an opportunity for her to manipulate, to guilt, to find some crack in my armor. so I didn't give her the opportunity. Trevor called it going ghost, and he was genuinely impressed. Most guys cave by day 3. He said over beers at Miller's Tavern, our new regular spot. They get hit with the I miss you texts and boom, they're back to square one, apologizing for having boundaries. Not this guy, I said, raising my beer. I've been vaccinated against bullshit, remember? Full immunity. Carter, who joined us for what was becoming our weekly tradition, laughed and clinked his bottle against mine. Dude, I've known you for what, 3 weeks? And even I can see the difference. You look like someone who actually sleeps at night. That's because I do, I admitted. Turns out, a good mattress and the absence of constant anxiety is better than any sleep medication on the market. By day 5 of the voicemail campaign, her friend Melissa reached out. Melissa, who I'd always actually liked, who seemed to be the only person in my wife's social circle with actual common sense. Hey, her text said, I know this is weird, but can we talk? Not about taking sides or anything. Just want to check in. We met for coffee at that hipster place where I'd had my revelation about resentment-free beverages. Melissa showed up looking uncomfortable, like she was about to defuse a bomb while wearing oven mitts. She ordered a latte. I got my usual, and we sat down at a corner table away from the other caffeine-dependent humans. So, she started, stirring her drink nervously, she's a mess. Yeah, I said. I figured. Like a real mess. Crying constantly, not eating, the whole dramatic breakdown thing. Melissa looked at me carefully, probably trying to gauge if this information would make me feel guilty or triumphant. She really thought you'd take her back. She thought the Paris thing would make you jealous enough to fight for her. I sipped my coffee, considering this. That's the problem right there. She thought this was about jealousy, about some game where whoever cares less wins. It was never about that. It was about me finally realizing I don't have to live my life seeking approval from someone who was never going to be satisfied anyway. Melissa nodded slowly. I told her the Paris thing was stupid, for what it's worth. Told her that pausing a marriage to go party in Europe was basically just asking for permission to cheat without technically cheating. But she didn't want to hear it. She was convinced she needed space to figure things out. And did she? Figure things out. Melissa laughed, but it was a sad sound. Oh yeah. She figured out that the grass isn't greener, it's just different grass. And that guy from her office, Philippe, or whatever his name was, turns out he was just being friendly because he's, French. She read way too much into it, got disappointed when nothing happened, and spent the rest of the trip realizing she'd nuked her marriage for Instagram stories and overpriced wine. I should have felt something at this information. Vindication, maybe, or pity, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of being expected to manage someone else's emotional chaos. That's rough, I said, and I meant it. Not rough enough to change my mind, but rough nonetheless. The thing is, Melissa continued, leaning forward, I'm not here to convince you to take her back. Honestly, I think you dodged a bullet. I've watched you guys together for years, and you've always seemed like you were walking on eggshells. Like you were constantly trying not to set her off. That's not a marriage. That's a hostage situation with joint checking accounts. I almost spit out my coffee. Tell me how you really feel, Melissa. She grinned. I'm just saying, you seem different now. Lighter. Like someone lifted a weight off your shoulders. And she seems. She paused, searching for the right word. Like someone who's realizing that she was the weight. We talked for another 20 minutes, about logistics and timelines, and how to navigate the social fallout of a marriage ending. Melissa promised to help coordinate the practical stuff, the division of belongings and friends, and all those awkward conversations that come with untangling two lives that had been woven together for 7 years. When she came by to pack her things the following Saturday, she brought Melissa as backup, which was probably smart. I'd spent the morning at the gym with Carter, lifting heavy things and putting them down again, which is apparently the universal cure for stress that doesn't require a prescription. By the time I got home, showered, and made myself presentable, they were already there. Her car pulled up outside with the trunk open like a mouth waiting to be fed. I opened the door, and there she was, looking smaller somehow, diminished. She'd lost that polished, put-together veneer she usually wore like armor. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and one of my old hoodies that she'd apparently claimed as hers somewhere along the way. For a split second, I almost felt bad. Almost. Hey, she said quietly, and I could see Melissa behind her. carrying empty boxes like she was moving into a college dorm in reverse. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. "I put everything I thought was yours in the guest room. If I missed anything, just grab it." The next few hours were surreal in that uniquely terrible way that only comes from watching your life get divided into his and hers piles. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, picking up photo frames and setting them down, touching things she'd bought, things we'd bought together, trying to decide what was worth keeping and what was just debris from a wreck she'd caused. At one point, she tried one last jab, because apparently people can't help themselves even in defeat. I was in the kitchen making coffee, because that's what you do when your life is falling apart around you. You make coffee and pretend it's helping. She came in, holding a picture from our wedding, and said, "You're really just giving up on us? On everything?" I looked at her, this woman I'd spent 7 years with, this person I'd molded myself around like water fitting into whatever container she provided. And I felt nothing but a quiet, steady certainty. "No," I said, pouring my coffee with steady hands. "I'm not giving up. I'm giving back. All the control you took, all the pieces of myself I handed over thinking that's what marriage required. I'm reclaiming all of it. You wanted to pause us? Fine. I'm hitting stop." Melissa appeared in the doorway, looking between us like a referee ready to call the match. "We should probably finish packing," she said gently, giving my wife a look that clearly meant, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." When the last box was loaded, when the car was full of her things and her regrets, she stood at the door for one final moment. "I really did love you," she said, and her voice cracked on the word love like it was too heavy to carry. "I know," I said, and I did. But love isn't enough when it comes with conditions, when it requires someone to shrink themselves to fit. You loved a version of me that I had to strain to be. I'm just choosing to love the real version instead. She looked at me, and I saw the moment when it finally, truly hit her. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a phase. This was the end, final and irreversible. She nodded once, turned, and walked to her car where Melissa was waiting, patient and sympathetic. I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away, the car turning the corner and disappearing like the last scene of a movie I'd been ready to walk out of for years. Then I shut the door, locked it, and stood in my apartment that suddenly felt more like a home than it had in forever. The quiet wasn't empty. It wasn't sad. It was just quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that comes after a storm when you realize you're still standing and the sky is starting to clear. I picked up my phone and texted Trevor and Carter. "She's gone." "Beer." Trevor responded immediately. "Hell yeah. Celebrating your parole." Carter sent a gif of someone doing a victory dance. I smiled, pocketed my phone, and looked around my space. My gym equipment. My woodworking table. My coffee maker brewing my terrible, wonderful coffee. My life, finally mine again. It felt like freedom. It felt like peace. It felt like the first deep breath after being underwater for too long. And it felt absolutely right. Months later, the divorce was final, stamped and sealed by a judge who'd probably processed 100 just like it that week. She tried to contest it, of course, because apparently accepting responsibility for your own actions is harder than getting a table at a trendy restaurant on a Saturday night. Her lawyer, some guy in an expensive suit who probably charged by the syllable, argued that the dissolution was premature, that we hadn't tried hard enough, that marriage deserved more effort than a few weeks of separation. Richard Caldwell, my golden retriever of an attorney, calmly presented our prenup, the one she'd insisted on back when she was making more money than me and wanted to protect her precious assets. The irony was so beautiful it almost brought tears to my eyes. She'd spent hours with her own lawyer 7 years ago, making sure that if things went south, she'd be protected from me. Now that same document was protecting me from her. The universe really does have a sense of humor, and apparently it's a fan of poetic justice. The prenup hit harder than karma wearing brass knuckles. Clean split, minimal drama, everything divided exactly as she'd specified back when she thought she was the one who needed protection. Her lawyer tried a few more angles, threw around some legal terms that were supposed to sound intimidating, but Richard just smiled his friendly smile and referred back to the document she'd signed with such confidence all those years ago. When the judge's gavel came down, finalizing everything, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not celebration, just this quiet sense of completion. Like finishing a book that had dragged on too long, but you'd kept reading out of obligation. Now I could finally close it and put it back on the shelf where it belonged, in the past tense, in the lessons learned section of my life. I walked out of that courthouse into sunshine that felt a little brighter, air that tasted a little cleaner. Trevor and Carter were waiting outside, leaning against Trevor's truck like they were the world's most supportive biker gang, minus the motorcycles and leather. When they saw me, they both grinned. "Free man walking," Trevor announced, like I was being released from prison, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. "How's it feel?" Carter asked. "Like I can finally breathe," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said in months. We went to Miller's Tavern, our unofficial headquarters, and had exactly one beer to celebrate. Just one, because I had work to do, a life to build, and hangovers were for people who had time to waste. My small woodworking business had taken off in ways I hadn't anticipated. Turns out, people really like custom furniture made by someone who puts actual care into their work instead of just churning out particle board garbage. I'd started with that bookshelf, posted it online because why not? And suddenly I had orders coming in from people who wanted pieces that actually meant something. My apartment had transformed into this hybrid space that was part home, part workshop, part gym. The woodworking table dominated the dining area, covered in sketches and with samples and half-finished projects. The corner where her decorative console used to collect dust now housed my weight rack and bench press. The living room had become this comfortable, lived-in space that actually reflected who I was instead of who I was supposed to be. Carter and Trevor had become more than friends. They'd become brothers in arms, the kind of people who show up when you need them without being asked. We'd turned Thursday nights into our standing gym session, followed by dinner at whatever restaurant we felt like trying, no dietary restrictions, no calorie counting, just food and conversation and the kind of easy friendship that doesn't require performance or pretense. I'd even started dating, though dating was probably too strong a word. More like occasionally meeting people for coffee or drinks, having conversations that didn't feel like job interviews, enjoying the company of women who didn't see me as a project that needed fixing. Nothing serious, nothing that required defining or labeling. Just the simple pleasure of getting to know people without the weight of expectation crushing everything. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at my favorite coffee shop, the hipster place that had witnessed my emotional evolution from doormat to human being. I was sketching out a design for a custom dining table someone had commissioned, lost in the details of joinery and wood grain, when I heard a voice I recognized. "Hey." I looked up, and there she was. Designer coat, perfectly styled hair, makeup applied with the precision of someone who'd spent way too much time in front of a mirror. She looked put together, polished, like an Instagram filter had manifested in physical form. But her eyes told a different story. They looked tired, hollow, like someone who'd been searching for something and kept coming up empty. "Hey," I said, setting down my pencil. I didn't stand up, didn't make a big deal out of it. Just acknowledged her presence the way you'd acknowledge an acquaintance you vaguely remembered from somewhere. "You look good," she said, and there was something in her voice that might have been genuine surprise. "Really good. Different." "Thanks," I said simply. "Peace looks good on everyone. You should try it sometime." She winced slightly, like the comment had landed in a place that was still tender. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what could have possibly brought her to my coffee shop, to my table, to this moment that neither of us needed. She sat down carefully, like the chair might be booby-trapped, and folded her hands on the table in front of her. "I've been thinking about you," she started, and I held up my hand. "Let me stop you right there," I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "If this is the part where you tell me you made a mistake, that you miss what we had, that you want another chance, you can save it. I'm not interested in reruns of shows I've already canceled." "That's not," she started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. "Okay, maybe it is a little bit that. But mostly I just wanted to say I get it now. What you were trying to tell me. About feeling like you couldn't breathe, about being someone you weren't. I get it now. Congratulations on your personal growth," I said, and I wasn't being sarcastic, not entirely. Genuinely. Self-awareness is important, but that doesn't change anything between us. There is no us anymore. There's you, there's me, and there's a whole lot of distance between those 2 points that I have no interest in crossing. She looked down at her hands, Those perfectly manicured fingers that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly coffee budget. I know. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. For all of it. The Paris thing, the way I treated you, the way I made you feel like you were never enough when really I was the one who wasn't enough. For me or for you. It was probably the most honest thing she'd said to me in years, maybe ever. And you know what? It didn't change anything. It didn't make me want to reconsider, didn't make me miss what we'd had, didn't make me doubt my decision for even a second. It just made me feel a little bit sorry for her, for this person who'd spent so long trying to control everything that she'd forgotten how to just be. I appreciate you saying that, I said, and I meant it. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I really do. But you're not going to find it by looking backward at what we used to be. That person you were married to? He doesn't exist anymore. He got demolished and rebuilt into someone better, someone who actually likes himself. And the person you are now? She's got her own work to do, her own demons to face. Neither of us can do that while holding on to what's already gone. We talked for maybe 2 more minutes, surface-level stuff about work and life, and how expensive rent had gotten. It was the kind of conversation you have with someone at a high school reunion, polite and distant, and ultimately meaningless. When she stood up to leave, she looked at me one more time with those tired eyes. You really are different, she said. Yeah, I agreed. I really am. She left, probably off to her next destination, her next attempt at finding fulfillment in external things instead of doing the internal work. I watched her walk away through the coffee shop window, watched her disappear into the crowd of people rushing through their lives, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not regret, not even the satisfaction of having the last word. Just a quiet neutrality, like watching a stranger pass by on the street. My phone buzzed. Text from Carter. Climbing gym at 7? I looked at the message, at this simple invitation to hang out with a friend, to do something I enjoyed with people I actually liked spending time with. No hidden agenda, no emotional manipulation, no strings attached. Just a question that deserved a simple answer. Absolutely, I typed back. I gathered my sketches, finished my coffee, and stood up to leave. As I walked out of the coffee shop into the afternoon sun, I thought about how she'd gone to Paris searching for freedom, for clarity, for whatever it was she thought was missing from her life. She'd flown thousands of miles, spent thousands of dollars, upended everything, and still came back empty. Meanwhile, I'd found my freedom right here. In sawdust and coffee grounds, in weight rooms and woodworking shops, in Thursday night dinners with friends, and quiet Sunday mornings spent building things with my hands. I'd found it in the simple, revolutionary act of choosing myself, of deciding that my peace was worth more than someone else's approval. She went to Paris searching for freedom, chasing it like it was something you could find in a different city, a different country, a different life. But I was the one who actually found it. Right here, in the life I'd rebuilt from the rubble she'd left behind. Right here, in the person I'd become when I finally stopped asking permission to exist. And you know what? It felt pretty damn good. I walked down the street toward my car, toward the climbing gym where Carter was waiting, toward whatever came next in this life I was building one day at a time. The sun was warm on my face. My phone was in my pocket instead of in my hand, checking for messages that would ruin my day. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like myself. The real version. The one I actually liked. The one who didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. That guy was pretty cool. And he was finally free.